The Case of Bodhisattva Potter. This is a story about two lovers who met in school and wanted to spend all their free time together, believing their love would last forever. However, they were unaware of how brutally their happiness could be shattered by an unexpected tragedy. Bodhisattva Potter was born in 1991 in Newport Beach, California, to Rick Potter and Scherzer. Bodhisattva also has an older brother named Zen. At the time of Bodhisattva and Zen's birth, both parents were in their 30s, and soon after, the family experienced significant career growth. Scherzer is a psychologist who specializes in working with autistic children. Her husband is a psychotherapist and also provides medical consultation. From a young age, Bodhisattva was very intelligent and kind. She was humble and maintained good relationships with everyone around her. All her teachers recognized her intellectual talent. Bodhisattva was also passionate about sports, especially gymnastics and basketball, and she pursued these hobbies and won several awards for her achievements. She also played the piano and sang. Her parents divorced in 1998. At the time, Bodhisattva was 8 years old and living in Newport Beach with her mother and brother. They moved to Hollandale, California, a small desert town with a population of just 6,000, about 2 hours away from their old home. Hollandale is an isolated community with a strong sense of community, with 2 large lakes that make it feel like an oasis in the desert. The town has about 2,000 homes and a well-developed sports and recreation infrastructure, making it feel like a small resort. Bodhisattva was accepted into the Lewis Center, an academy whose curriculum prepares students for entry into top universities. At this time, Zen moved back in with his father, and Bodhisattva stayed with his mother. Despite the distance, the two brothers often spent weekends and holidays together. Initially, Bodhisattva and her mother rented a house. In 2004, when she was 12 years old, her mother bought a plot of land near a lake to build her dream home. Bodhisattva was actively involved in the design of the new house, but the construction process took longer than expected due to high costs, so they continued to live in the rented house during this time. On Bodhisattva's 13th birthday, she gradually became more mature. She began to seek independence. Her mother recognized this change and allowed her daughter more freedom. Over time, Bodhisattva became interested in Hollywood and dreamed of becoming a film producer. By 2007, she was in high school and began dating Christopher Cody Thompson, her first love. They were a perfect match, sharing many interests in film, psychology, and architecture, and they enjoyed exploring abandoned buildings together. Cody, born in 1989 in Victorville, California, is 2 years older than Bodhisattva. He has 2 older sisters, Sarah and Katie. Cody is a young man passionate about nature and cycling, and he enjoys restoring custom bikes with his father. At the time he met Bodhisattva, Cody had been working as a teaching assistant for 2 years. People generally describe him as friendly and outgoing. Scherzer was surprised to find out that her daughter had a boyfriend. She felt that it was too early for her daughter to start a relationship and was prepared to intervene if necessary. However, as a psychologist, she realized that she needed to accompany her daughter. She understood that her daughter was growing up and that this journey could not be controlled by restrictions alone. Initially, she considered Cody to be a bit rude, which made her feel uncomfortable. However, as they began to communicate, they found common ground. The Scherzer soon realized that her initial judgment about Cody was wrong. He turned out to be a good person. She felt more secure about her daughter's relationship. Cody graduated from high school and began working for the family business, which helped him become financially independent. He was able to support himself and even buy his own car. He has a passion for exploring old buildings, so he scheduled a visit to an old military bunker that had been repurposed and is now open to the public. Initially, the place attracted many adventure lovers. Over time, it became a popular place for teenage parties. However, the place was not safe. The bunker was often used by addicts to do drugs, and people also came here to practice shooting for themselves. Despite these risks, Cody still wanted to visit because of its uniqueness. Many of his friends knew about it but disapproved of his hobby. However, Cody was attracted to the place and liked the feeling of being in a secret location. In December 2007, after turning 18, Cody planned to take his 16-year-old girlfriend, Bodhi, to the bunker to show her the place they both loved for exploring abandoned sites. Excited by the idea, Bodhi invited her mother to join them. Her mother, Scherzer, objected to the idea. She was shocked by the plans the couple had made. Scherzer warned that the place could be dangerous and forbade Bodhisattva from going there. Although Bodhisattva understood her mother's concerns, her rebellious teenage spirit got the better of her. She did not fully understand the dangers of the place. Despite her mother's warnings, she was determined to explore the bunker. In January 2008, Scherzer was in Newport on business. While her mother was away, Bodhisattva had a few days free to do whatever she wanted. She decided to take the opportunity to visit the shelter. At the time, Cody had planned to take 30 people from the school to the abandoned shelter in the woods. To get to the abandoned building, she asked her friend Andrew to drive her there. He picked Bodhisattva up from home and drove her there on the evening of Friday, January 4, 2008. Bodhisattva hid her intentions from her mother and brother. She told her brother that she was going to see their mother, while she assured her mother that she would stay home with her brother. Bodhisattva was clever enough to make her story sound believable, and her family believed her. On the evening of January 4th, when she and Andrew arrived at the bunker, several cars were there, including those of Cody and his friends. Everyone was enjoying the music and having a good time. Their group was quite large, making them feel safe. The teens explored the empty bunker and had fun until about 4 a.m. When everyone started to leave, Cody and Bodhisattva decided to stay and sleep overnight in his car under the stars, taking advantage of the time when their mother was not there. Bodhisattva and Cody fell asleep until Cody received a call from one of his friends. The friend had lost his iPad, but Cody found it in a car and promised to return it at their next meeting. After the call, Cody went back to sleep and did not contact anyone again. Around 4:30 a.m., Scherzer woke up with a sharp pain in her chest, feeling as if she had been stabbed. She felt worried about her daughter, but decided to wait until 6:30 to call Bodhisattva. It was their family's habit to start the day with a short conversation to ask how everyone was doing. However, when Scherzer called, Bodhisattva did not answer. Scherzer tried to call her daughter, but the call was unsuccessful. She then contacted Zen and discovered Bodhisattva's lie. Zen thought her sister was with their mother, while the mother believed Bodhisattva was with Zen. They discovered that Bodhisattva had gone with Andrew, who had picked her up from home and had taken her somewhere, leaving her family worried and angry. Scherzer also tried to contact Andrew, but was unsuccessful. Scherzer, who was in another city at the time, decided to contact the police. At that time, Bodhisattva had not been reached for about 10 hours, but the police explained that it was not enough time to officially classify her as missing. The police initially thought that Bodhisattva had simply run away or gone out with friends. Meanwhile, her mother felt helpless because she was far away. Scherzer's worries grew when she called Cody's mother, who had also not seen her son since the night before and was extremely worried. They began contacting all of their son's friends and discovered that the two had attended a party at an abandoned bunker the night before, and no one had heard from them since. This was Bodhisattva's mother's worst nightmare, as she considered the location to be one of the dangerous. Zen and his friends quickly arrived at the location and found Cody's car parked outside an abandoned building. Both the driver's and passenger doors were wide open, which added to their worries as there was no one inside. Zen and his friends grabbed flashlights and entered the building. The search continued for several hours, with them splitting up and searching different areas of the bunker. Eventually, one of the friends discovered Cody in a room of the abandoned building. He showed no signs of life. The most alarming detail was that Cody was missing an eye, and Bodhisattva was still missing. Zen immediately called 911 to report the incident. Around 3 p.m. that day, Cody's mother received a call informing her that her son had been shot. Upon hearing this, Bodhisattva's mother was extremely panicked, although she still held on to a faint hope that her daughter was alive. She then quickly went to the shelter to look for her daughter. Meanwhile, the police were on their way to the scene, but the journey took a long time. When the police arrived, they searched the bunker area, and some police were outside to question those who had witnessed the incident. The bunker was complex and confusing, like a maze. Inside, it was so dark that even the light of a few lanterns could not help the police gather information. The teenagers who found Cody's body helped the police locate him. He had a serious gunshot wound to the head, which caused him to lose an eye and eventually die. Cody's body was removed from the bunker, but the search did not end there. Because it was so dark inside, the police had to wait for generators and lights to be installed inside the bunker. Later, near where Cody's body was found, police also discovered Bodhisattva's body in the hallway. She had suffered gunshot wounds to the chest and head. There were no signs of rape. The weapon used was determined to be a handgun. Both victims had multiple wounds to their bodies. Unfortunately, there were no surveillance cameras inside the shelter. Police began questioning everyone who was at the party that night, hoping that someone might have seen something unusual. This information could be crucial in solving the case. None of the victims' belongings had been stolen, not even the iPad had been left in the car. There were no signs of sexual assault or struggle. Police were piecing together what might have happened on the night of the murder. After Cody's final phone call, the attackers forced the young couple out of the car and took them to a dark shelter, where they were shot one by one. It appears that Bodhisattva tried to escape but was caught at the end of the hallway and shot. The shocking murders of Bodhisattva and Cody caused widespread public outrage. Such a dangerous military site was easily accessible. It was not fenced, locked, or monitored. As a result, a debate arose over the demolition of the abandoned building. During the investigation, police learned that several years earlier, a young man had encountered a group of dangerous men in the area. The men were clean-shaven and acted aggressively, suggesting they were members of the same gang. However, the men were never seen again after that encounter. In their investigation, the police focused on a call made by a friend to Cody at 4:30 a.m., when Cody was still alive. Bodhisattva's mother then attempted to reach her daughter at 6:30 a.m. but was unable to make contact. This timeline indicates that the tragic events leading to the double murder occurred between these two calls, starting after 4:30 a.m. A large amount of evidence was collected at the crime scene. Forensic scientists had to analyze thousands of fingerprints and hundreds of spent cartridges, as well as a large amount of trash in the abandoned building, to determine what was related to the case. In addition, the victims' computers were confiscated for valuable information. Police believe that Cody and Bodhisattva may have had an argument with someone, leading to the attack. During questioning, some friends who attended the party recalled that 3 strangers entered the basement. These strangers, aged 17 to 18, arrived in a Honda Odyssey van around midnight and asked to join the party. They were allowed to stay and brought alcohol to share. Cody's group thought they were normal teenagers and didn't suspect anything unusual. However, none of Cody's friends could remember when the strangers left the party. On January 13th, the police received a crucial tip from Sean, an informant. He revealed that his friend, David Smith, had called him on the night of the murders, inviting Sean to a bunker for shooting practice. Sean declined the invitation. A few days later, David contacted him again, sounding very concerned. Sean asked David about recent events, and Sean received a vague answer that alluded to a serious crime. This led Sean to suspect that David might be involved in the double murder at the bunker, so he reported his concerns to the police. Police later interviewed a key witness, who identified David Smith as a 19-year-old from Limestone, about an hour and a half from Holy Dale. On the night of the murder, David and his friends Colin McLaughlin, 18, and Cameron Thompson, 16, had set out for a fun night out that turned deadly. They drove Cameron's mother's SUV into the desert, where they stumbled upon a bunker party. The teens gathered there became their targets, leading to the tragic events that unfolded. In 2007, David, a former high school track and field athlete, lost his athletic scholarship to the University of California, Riverside after a disagreement with the head coach. Unable to pay for college, he was expelled and moved in with his friend Cameron, who then introduced him to Colin. The three quickly became close friends, but their aggressive behavior scared the local residents. The three criminals were arrested on January 17th, but all three denied any involvement in the crime. During a police search of their home, the police found the murder weapon. In addition, blood was found on clothing and shoes, and tests confirmed that the blood belonged to Bodhisattva and Cody, who were murdered. Friends who were present at the bunker that night identified the attackers as strangers who had brought alcohol to the party. All of the teens came from troubled families. Colin's father was a police officer, which gave them access to the weapon used in the murder. Colin, considered the ringleader of the group, had struggled with mental health issues since he was 5 years old. By the age of 17, Colin had attended 7 different schools and had spent some time in an adult detention center. He had significant difficulties adapting socially, which were made worse by his use of alcohol and drugs. During the investigation, many witnesses reported his troubling behavior. Colin even confided in friends that he had thoughts of killing. When he was angry or had an argument with his parents, he would often threaten to kill them. As Colin entered his teens, many people began to fear him, especially when he started talking about mass murder online. During a search of Colin's belongings, police discovered evidence that he had a history of violence. Colin had repeatedly threatened to kill others, including writing detailed notes about shooting up classmates. While in school, he was evaluated by a psychiatrist and diagnosed with bipolar disorder, and he was put on medication. At age 16, Colin faced court charges for attempting to build an explosive device, a year before he killed Bodhisattva and Cody. He was placed in juvenile detention and, upon his release, was placed on probation for several months. Prior to the killings, he had stopped taking his bipolar medication. The suspects, Colin McLaughlin, Cameron Thompson, and David Smith, have not confessed to the crime. However, during pre-trial hearings, Colin was identified as the primary perpetrator of the murder and was released on $2 million bail. He faces a potential prison sentence of 111 years. In contrast, David Smith's bail was set at $1 million and he faces up to 81 years in prison for his involvement in the crime. In February 2009, the prosecutor's office announced its intention to pursue the death penalty against Colin, while David and Cameron were likely to receive life sentences. The defense argued that Colin, who suffers from bipolar disorder, should receive treatment instead of being detained or executed. As a result, a psychological evaluation was ordered. In 2010, 2 forensic psychiatrists evaluated Colin and determined that he was mentally sound and aware of his actions at the time of the crime, meaning he was sane and competent to stand trial. Bodhisattva's mother Scherzer believed that the killer should not be executed. She felt that the appropriate punishment would be imprisonment for all 3 criminals so that they could understand the severity of their actions. The case took a long time to resolve, lasting more than 4 years due to discussions about the evidence and the ages of the criminals. It was eventually decided to try the criminals as adults. In 2011, Cameron Thompson reached a deal with the prosecution. He pleaded guilty to manslaughter and attempted robbery. He agreed to testify against his two friends. Cameron explained that the three of them had planned to rob a car in the desert, but when they arrived, they found no one there. Instead, they stumbled upon a party in a nearby bunker. Initially, they asked to join and gain the trust of the teenagers at the party. But there were too many people and they realized that this was not the right time to strike. They decided to wait until most of the teens had left before attacking anyone. The criminals hid in a truck, armed with guns, and were not detected by Cody. When the couple fell asleep in the truck, the criminals sprang into action. They forced the sleeping couple out of the truck at gunpoint and took them to a dark, secluded area of the bunker. There, they forced the couple to their knees, and Cody was shot execution style. Bodhisattva tried to escape but was caught and shot by Colin. They then returned to Cody and shot him again. Unfortunately for the criminals, the couple had no valuables, so the robbery was unsuccessful. They then left the bunker and went home. As part of the deal, Cameron was sentenced to life in prison. Although he had the right to apply for parole, his request was denied and he remains in custody. Colin also accepted a plea deal. Colin remained mostly calm throughout the trial. However, there were instances where he laughed, stuck out his tongue, or acted defiantly, suggesting underlying mental health issues. As a result, Colin was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. In 2016, David Smith, a third defendant, also reached a deal. For his cooperation with police, he was sentenced to 50 years in prison and was eligible for parole after 12 years. The case of Susan Wright. Susan met Jeffrey Wright while working as a waiter at a restaurant in Galveston, Texas. They quickly fell in love and were married a year later. They soon had 2 children, and Susan's family seemed to be the ideal one. Jeffrey was a successful carpet salesman, while Susan managed the house and raised the children. They lived in a large house in Harris County, Texas. However, despite their outward success, things were not going well. Susan often had bruises on her body, indicating trouble behind closed doors. On a cold January evening, January 13, 2003, 26-year-old Susan stabbed her husband, Jeffrey, 93 times and buried his body in their backyard. The following day, Susan sought a restraining order against Jeffrey, claiming he had assaulted her the night before. 5 days later, she called her lawyer and confessed to killing her husband. The lawyer then contacted the police and informed them of the location of Jeffrey's body. When the police arrived, they discovered Jeffrey's body, which had been partially unearthed by a dog. He was found with his wrists bound and his robe tied around his ankles. Susan was later arrested. Susan pleaded not guilty, stating she acted in self-defense. She tearfully shared stories of the abuse she endured during her marriage, describing her husband as a sadistic substance abuser who seemed charming on the outside but controlled and belittled her. She lived in fear of his temper and was afraid to speak up when he was angry. He threatened to kill her and their children if she ever tried to leave. Susan recounted a specific incident when Jeffrey came home high from boxing classes and wanted to continue the training with their 4-year-old son, Bradley. He struck Bradley in the face, which made the child cry, and then he insulted him. Later, he turned violent towards Susan, forcing her to lie down in bed and then raped her. Afterward, he returned with a knife, and at that moment, Susan realized he was truly dangerous. Fearing for her life, she fought back by grabbing the knife and kicking him in the groin with her knee. Susan recounted that during the struggle, she managed to wrest the knife from her husband. She first stabbed him in the neck and then continued to stab him several times in the torso. At that time, her son, Bradley, knocked on the bedroom door and entered. Susan realized that she needed to get the child out of the bedroom. But she was afraid that Jeffrey would wake up and endanger her and her child. To prevent this, she tied her husband's right hand with a tie on the bed and hid the knife. She then brought Bradley back into the room. She expressed that she knew he was going to kill her and that she was very scared. Despite her fear, she stabbed him several times. After cutting the tie that bound him, she pulled her husband out of bed. His shoulder hit the nightstand, spilling wax from the candles he had lit earlier. She then brought a cart into the bedroom, placed him on it, tied his left hand to the cart, and tied his legs with a belt from his robe. She pushed the cart outside to the hole he had dug a few days ago and buried him. However, she insisted that she believed he was still alive. She spent the entire night on the couch, holding a knife, convinced that he would get up and pursue her. Susan was terrified to fall asleep, fearing she would be killed, but he never returned. She later shared that on the night of the murder, she suffered a mental breakdown that lasted several days. When asked why she didn't report it to the police right away, she said her mind was still struggling to comprehend the situation. It wasn't until Saturday morning, 5 days later, that she began to grasp the gravity of what had happened. The defense attorney highlighted multiple defensive wounds on Jeffrey's body, indicating that he was not initially restrained and had tried to fight back. Prosecutor Kelly Sigler alleged that Susan deceived her husband into getting into bed and tied him to the headboard, leading him to believe they were about to play a game. At that moment, she revealed a knife and turned the bedroom into a scene of torture. The prosecution stated that Susan's motive was to claim a $200,000 life insurance payout. They also pointed out that Susan had previously been a topless dancer at age 17, characterizing her as a promiscuous woman. During the trial, a bloody bed was brought into the courtroom. One prosecutor secured the bedposts while Kelly removed her high heels, sat on her colleague, and reenacted the knife stabs using the actual knife that Susan had used. This dramatic demonstration shocked everyone present. After 5 hours of deliberation, the jury rejected Susan's self-defense claim and convicted her of first-degree murder. As a result, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. In November 2004, Susan filed an appeal. Her new attorney argued that she had not received a fair trial, claiming that the prosecutor's staging of the trial had influenced the jury's decision. The case was complicated by the fact that Susan's previous lawyers lacked experience and did not provide adequate representation. They failed to call witnesses who could support Jeffrey's claims of abuse and did not consult domestic violence experts. Crucially, they did not bring in the psychologist who had assessed Susan after the incident and determined that she was in a psychotic state, genuinely believing that Jeffrey was still alive. These points were compelling, leading to a new sentencing hearing in early 2009. A new trial began, and during the trial, the psychologist finally revealed what Susan had shared with him. She told him that she had woken up in a cold sweat, afraid that Jeffrey would try to come back. She had been convinced that he was right behind the fence. It took her a long time to realize that he would not come back. The psychologist noticed Susan's shy and submissive demeanor. She apologized for everything. This behavior is very common among women in abusive relationships. After the police investigated the case further, it was discovered that after turning 18, she had worked as a semi-nude dancer in a bar. However, after 2 months, she quit her job. After graduating from college, at the age of 20, she met Jeffrey, 29. He treated her well, gave her flowers and took her to fancy restaurants and clubs. Jeffrey expressed his love for her, and Susan found him sweet and handsome, with beautiful brown eyes. They married in October 1998, and a month later, their son Bradley was born. Since the birth of their son, he has changed a lot. He began to humiliate her for gaining weight during pregnancy and reacted angrily when she confided in him about her postpartum depression. Jeffrey even forbade her from taking the antidepressants prescribed by her doctor. He wanted her to become a housewife, staying at home all day. He only allowed her to go to the grocery store or visit her mother, limited to an hour and a half. One day, when she asked if she could attend some classes, he refused. When he found out she had gone to those classes, he became angry, verbally abused her, and physically assaulted her. Susan initially did not know that Jeffrey was using illegal drugs or that he had been convicted of possession in 1996 and was on probation. However, she began to suspect that he was using drugs, and her concerns were confirmed when she found drugs in their home. He then openly used drugs in front of her and became increasingly aggressive. Susan feared for the safety of her children and tried to protect them from his violent outbursts. She noted that the physical violence increased after they moved into their home in April 1999. His anger flared for a variety of reasons, such as financial problems, the electric bill, meals he did not like, or noise from the children. Susan described how he would often kick her in the chest, stomach, back, and legs. He also kicked their dog and sometimes threw it across the room. This may have caused the dog to harbor resentment toward Jeffrey, which may explain why it later dug up his body and bit off part of his hand in retaliation. Susan explained that at first she did not tell anyone about the abuse. She did not feel ashamed, but instead felt guilty, thinking, "It was my fault, and I was not good enough for him." To hide the signs of abuse, she rarely left the house. She never considered seeing a doctor to treat her injuries or reporting Jeffrey to the police, fearing that he would retaliate with more violence if she did. When a lawyer asked her why she did not leave him, she replied, "He threatened to kill her and her children if she tried to leave." However, she escaped in 1999 after another brutal beating. While Jeffrey was at work, she called her sister Cindy, who arrived with her husband and a trailer to help her move. They packed their belongings, along with Susan and her child, and went to her parents' house. The next morning, Jeffrey called Susan to her parents' house, threatening that a truck would be arriving soon and that she needed to load her belongings into the truck and return home, or he would kill her and her child. Fearing for their safety, she complied. Susan became pregnant again in December 2000, but unfortunately, she miscarried after Jeffrey kicked her in the stomach. She became pregnant a third time, and in December 2001, she gave birth to a daughter named Kaylee. Susan then suffered from postpartum depression, which made Jeffrey even angrier. He began dating other women through a website called enigmas and eventually infected Susan with a sexually transmitted disease. In 2002, Jeffrey changed jobs and began to earn very little money. His behavior became increasingly erratic. He bought an air gun and told his wife that he needed it to maintain discipline in the family. On one occasion, he beat his wife with the gun and even hit her on the head with a brick. On New Year's Eve 2003, he ominously told Susan, "Happy New Year, this will be your last year." Susan's relatives, neighbors, and friends testified that Jeffrey physically abused her. They described him as violent and aggressive, often unable to control his anger. The defense highlighted that during the initial investigation, the police overlooked numerous holes in the walls of their home that Jeffrey caused by hitting Susan. There was also a broken bathroom door. Jeffrey had slammed it on her hand with such force that he broke her hand. It was established that Susan was unaware Jeffrey had taken out a $200,000 life insurance policy, which he kept secret from her. Additionally, Susan's mother reported seeing multiple bruises on her daughter and heard her scream in pain when she tried to hug her due to severe back pain. The prosecutor's witnesses included several friends and co-workers of Jeffrey, all of whom testified that he was a great person. One friend described Jeffrey's marriage to Susan as very happy and perfect. While the couple's friends acknowledged that Jeffrey had previously struggled with substance abuse, they insisted that those days were long behind him and that his marriage had positively changed his life. The prosecutor raised questions about how Susan managed to stop, tie him up, open the door, take Bradley, walk him down the hallway, return to the room, close the door, get another knife, and then go back to the bedroom to continue the attack. The prosecutor argued that Susan was aware of her actions and was attempting to conceal the crime. Kelly pointed out that the following day, Susan came to the police station to request a warrant against Jeffrey and later admitted she was trying to mislead the investigation. The prosecutor further noted that after the incident, Susan took the children to her sister's house and tried to scrub the bloodstains from the carpet and floor using bleach. She also dragged the blood-soaked mattress to the backyard to wash it. Susan claimed she only cleaned because she believed Jeffrey was still alive and feared he would reprimand her for the mess. However, the prosecutor questioned why, if she thought he was alive, she bought bags of dirt and covered him up. Susan answered that she felt she needed to hide him out of fear that he would wake up and be extremely angry. During the trial, Jeffrey's ex-girlfriend testified about her experiences with him. She explained that she moved in with Jeffrey, who was living with his parents at the time. At first, she found him charming, but he soon became abusive, particularly after drinking. She described instances where he would insult her, lift her by her hands, and even throw her down the stairs. After one violent incident, she injured herself on a piece of glass and reported it to the police, which led to Jeffrey's arrest. While he was in custody, he threatened her and pressured her to withdraw the police report, leaving her terrified of what he might do when he got out of prison. Ultimately, she fled to another city, but Jeffrey tracked her down. By then, she had started a new relationship with a man who could protect her. A social worker who specializes in domestic violence and a professor from Houston College of Law, known for their research on women who experience violence, both confirmed that Susan was a typical victim of domestic abuse. They explained that women in such situations often feel that the only way to escape is to eliminate their abuser. Despite the evidence and arguments of the defense, Susan was again convicted, but her sentence was reduced to 20 years in prison. She was recently released early after serving 16 years. The case of Heidi Broussard. 33 years old Heidi Broussard worked as a waitress in a small restaurant in Buda, Texas, which has a population of around 7,000 people. She was also attending veterinary school, aspiring to become a veterinarian. Recently, she got engaged to her boyfriend, Shane Curry, after being together for 10 years. They met while working together and quickly fell in love. They has a 5-year-old son named Silas, who was born while they were still living in Louisiana. Heidi's best friend, Megan Fire-Muska, is also 33 years old and works as a wedding planner. The two met at a children's camp when they were 11 and have been best friends for 20 years. In early 2019, when Heidi announced she was pregnant with her second child, Megan shared that she was also expecting. Heidi was thrilled about their pregnancies and looked forward to spending time with Megan, sharing parenting experiences, and supporting each other. They began spending more time together, planning every moment of the pregnancy, bought baby clothes, cribs, and diapers, attended childbirth classes, and even went swimming together. Megan was present at the births of both of Heidi's children, including baby Margot in November 2019. They were so close that Heidi hoped their daughters would grow up to be best friends, just like them. At 7:30 a.m. on December 12, 2019, Heidi dropped off her 5-year-old son, Silas, at school. By 2 p.m., the school called her fiancé, Shane, to inform him that Heidi had not returned to pick up Silas, which was unusual since she was never late. Concerned, Shane quickly drove to the school, picked up Silas, and headed home. He expected that when he returned home, he would find Heidi and Margot at home. He thought maybe she had simply fallen asleep and forgotten to pick up Silas. However, when Shane arrived home, he was shocked to find no one in the house. He started to worry, thinking that Heidi might have taken Margot for a walk and lost track of time. He tried calling her, but she didn't answer. Then he considered that she might be with her best friend, Megan, who was about to give birth. Shane called Megan, but she said she hadn't seen Heidi that day, which was odd since they usually met daily for walks. As Shane searched the house for clues, he noticed that Heidi had left behind all of Margot's essentials, diapers, food, her wallet with money and cards, and the car keys. It suddenly hit him that something was seriously wrong. Heidi never went out with Margot without these items. Shane grew increasingly worried. Then, he called 911 around 7 p.m. to report Heidi and their newborn daughter's disappearance, Margot. The police arrived quickly and began searching for them. They examined the house and found no signs of a break-in or struggle. Everything was neatly organized. Initially, the officer suspected Shane because the husbands are often involved in such cases. However, Shane had an alibi. He had been at work all day and was cleared of suspicion. Despite this, some people still suspected him. During an interview, people scrutinized Shane's behavior, consider him a guilty person. Shane recounted that he last spoke to Heidi on the phone around 8:30 a.m. She told him she had taken Silas to school, and then, she with Margot attended a book fair. She bought several books she had been eager to read. She also purchased children's books to read to their son, Silas. She is passionate about reading books and had been building her own library at home. After their conversation, Shane returned to work, and Heidi did not contact him again. Detectives started to thoroughly investigate the house and the nearby area. They found that Heidi's car was parked in the garage. According to Shane, she exclusively drove her own car and never used taxis. This indicated that she hadn't gone far and was likely still in the vicinity. Both she and Margot have been placed on the search list, and a major search is underway in the area. While checking the surrounding area, investigators discovered a surveillance camera at a neighbor's home. They asked the neighbor to provide video footage from that camera. Then began reviewing camera video footage and interviewing nearby residents. The videos show Heidi, Margot, and Silas arriving at school at 7:30 a.m. Later, she and Margot returned home. A while later, they left the house, getting into a silver car. The video quality was poor, making it impossible to identify the car's license plate or model. This was the last sighting of Heidi alive. A neighbor reported seeing she in their apartment complex that morning, carrying a small child and approaching a parked car. A woman exited the car and greeted her. Both women then got into the car with the child and drove away. The disappearances of Heidi and her daughter, Margot, were linked to a woman. The police officer began to identify this unknown woman. Shane mentioned that the silver car matched the description of his friend's vehicle. He was convinced the woman in the car was his friend Megan, as he believed Heidi would never get into a stranger's car. Megan had a key to their home, given to her for emergencies. Detectives reached out to Megan, but she denied any involvement in the disappearance. Megan also told the police that she had not seen Heidi's that day and shared some other information. She suspected Shane was involved in the situation. Heidi had previously confided in her about experiencing physical violence from he. Heidi claimed that Shane drank heavily and was abusive. Although Heidi wanted to leave him multiple times, she discovered she was pregnant for the second time and decided to give him another chance. Shane proposed, and they started planning their wedding. For a while, their relationship seemed peaceful. However, it seems that Shane has abused Heidi again. Megan showed photos of Heidi with bruises, but many people were skeptical. Upon closer examination, one photo revealed a trace from an ore drip on her arm, while another showed a small bruise that likely came from everyday activities. These are not the same as signs of domestic violence. There is no proof that Shane attacked Heidi. Police records showed no calls to Heidi's home for help. Shane denied the allegations, asserting that he loved Heidi. They were preparing for marriage, and he maintained that there had never been any violence in their relationship. Investigators searched for additional CCTV cameras in the vicinity and discovered several nearby. They collected the footage and began analyzing it. The quality of the recordings was better than expected, allowing the detective to identify a car. It was clearly determined to be Megan's car. Shane identified her. It turns out that she met Heidi that day, although she had previously denied it. She was the last person to see Heidi and Margot before they went missing. Therefore, she became the main suspect in the case. Investigators kept an eye on Megan's home. They noticed her boyfriend, Christopher, leaving and decided to follow him, but he was just going to the store to buy baby formula. The detectives approached him and showed him a photo of baby Margot. He recognized Margot and he confirmed that Megan had referred to the child as her child. Margot is in the house with her. It is clear that she is involved in this incident. The police obtained a search warrant and returned to Megan's house in Houston. When they knocked on the door, Megan opened it, holding a baby monitor in her hand and looking very worried. Inside, a baby was sleeping in a crib. Megan claimed the infant was hers and insisted she had no involvement in the disappearance of Heidi and Margot, but no one believed her. Shane recognized his daughter, Margot, by her face and clothes. The Texas Rangers detectives noticed Megan's car outside, the same silver vehicle believed to have been used by Heidi when she left. As they approached the car, they noticed the stench of a decomposing body, a smell they were familiar with. Opening the trunk revealed a horrific discovery. Heidi's body was inside a large sports bag and in poor condition. Megan was immediately arrested, and DNA testing proved that she was involved in the incident. Margot was returned to her father, Shane. Shane couldn't believe that Megan, Heidi's best friend for over 20 years, could have killed her. They had a close and trusting relationship, rarely argued, and no one thought this would happen. After Heidi went missing, Megan called Shane daily to check on the investigation. Shane began to feel that Megan was overly fixated on Heidi, resenting the time Heidi spent with her husband and children without her. During the investigation, it became clear that Megan was actively involved in searching for Heidi. She researched Amber Alerts and the investigation online, searching for Heidi's name 162 times. An autopsy later revealed that Heidi had been strangled, leading the case to be classified as a homicide, and the investigation continued. Megan informed investigators that she had given birth at a birthing center in Woodland, north of Houston, on December 10th. Just days before Heidi's disappearance, and had brought the baby home the same day. However, when questioned, she could not recall the name of the center, making it difficult for investigators to verify her story. The police contacted all maternity hospitals in the state but found no record of a woman named Megan giving birth. It was discovered that she had not visited any medical facility and lied to her boyfriend, Christopher, about her weekly medical checkup. Investigators tracked the phone records of both Heidi and Megan, revealing that they had traveled together from Buda to Megan's house in Houston, where Heidi's body was found in Megan's car. The car had been parked near Christopher's house for an entire week, and Megan drove it daily, despite the overwhelming smell of decomposition from the body inside. How did Christopher, Megan's boyfriend, not notice the smell? He was later questioned by investigators. He explained that he and Megan had been together for about 2 years, but in March 2019, he grew tired of the relationship and decided to break up. He asked her to move out, but she refused, claiming she had nowhere else to go. Feeling sorry for her, he allowed her to stay, and they lived in separate rooms in his house with minimal communication. Christopher found it difficult to kick Megan out of the house, and when he learned that she was pregnant, he decided to give their relationship another chance. He touched her belly a few times during the pregnancy but didn't realize it was a false pregnancy. He admitted that he had never seen her belly when she was undressed, due to the tension in their relationship. but he noticed it was growing and assumed it was real. Whenever Megan had a doctor's appointment, Christopher was not there and she did not invite him. This made him feel comfortable because he did not want to go with her. He was also away during the birth and only learned that Megan had given birth to a daughter while walking on the beach. When he returned home and saw her holding a baby, Megan claimed the birth went smoothly and that she hadn't seen a doctor. Her family video called her and remarked that she looked happy with the baby. They had visited Megan a few days before the birth and thought she looked pregnant. She has a big belly. In reality, Megan had never been pregnant. She had been pretending the entire time. Megan faked her pregnancy, deceiving everyone, including her boyfriend Christopher. This was part of a troubling scheme to take Heidi's daughter, Margot. This plan was devised by her to keep her boyfriend. When Christopher learned the truth, he broke up with her and moved in with his mother for a while because he was being hounded by the press and couldn't live in peace. He was not charged with any crime, as police were confident he had no knowledge of Megan's intentions. He was only involved in the case as a witness. Megan grew up in a family of 9 siblings, and her youngest brother was only 9 years old. She always dreamed of having many children and a big family. But she cannot get pregnant. Her relationship with her boyfriend Christopher also quickly ended. Overwhelmed by despair, she developed a horrific plan. When she learned that Heidi was pregnant, she is extremely jealous of Heidi and dreams of being pregnant. She decided that Heidi's baby would be the solution to her problem. She tricked Heidi into getting into her car, then drove them far from home. Once there, she attacked and strangled Heidi, placing Heidi's body in the trunk before returning home. As the search for Heidi began, Megan pretends to be sad because his best friend is missing. She even contacted multiple local TV stations, urging them to cover the story so that no one would think she was involved. Megan was later charged with kidnapping Heidi and Margot, as well as murder, and she faced the death penalty. It was revealed that Megan had a prior conviction for theft. The charges indicated that she had originally planned not only to kidnap Margot but also to murder Heidi to accomplish this. She realized that Heidi would not willingly give up her child and was prepared to commit murder to get what she wanted. According to Megan, Heidi's second pregnancy was unexpected, and at the time, her financial situation was challenging. Initially, she considered terminating the pregnancy. Megan asked her not to do this, and even asked she to give Megan's the baby, but no one took Megan's words seriously. They thought she was joking. This might have been when Megan devised her plan. Ultimately, Heidi decided against terminating the pregnancy, and she and Shane chose to keep the child. However, Shane feels confused and doesn't know how to manage life with 2 children. Shane suspected that someone else was involved in the case. For at that time, Heidi was bigger and stronger than Megan, and Megan wouldn't have been able to handle everything on her own. He thought someone must have assisted Megan with the murder. He also did not understand how Megan could have stuffed Heidi's body into a bag and put it in the trunk of the car by himself. Heidi's family also suspects that Megan had help, but they don't think it was Christopher, as he wanted to break up with her. They believe Megan may have manipulated him into staying because of the child, suggesting he became a victim of her deception. A witness who claimed to have seen someone else in the car with Megan and Heidi, but this person did not see their face. Megan was in the front passenger seat, Heidi was in the back, and a stranger was driving. However, Shane never confirmed this information. Megan told Heidi and Shane that she had given birth to a girl on December 8th, but she did not show the baby to anyone, not even Heidi. Megan also did not share pictures of her newborn daughter on social media and very secretive about it. It is rumored that she had a nightmare about someone kidnapping her child, which frightened her and she decided not to show the baby to anyone. Before she disappeared, Heidi shared her worries with Shane about Megan. She found it strange that Megan didn't invite her family. although she invited Megan to attend the birth twice. She wanted to be with Megan at this crucial moment, and she felt offended by Megan's choice to keep it private. Megan explained that she was superstitious and preferred not to share the moment with others. Additionally, Shane recalled another odd incident. When Heidi was discharged from the hospital after giving birth, Megan, who was supposedly 37 weeks pregnant, can't leave the baby and constantly asks to hold the baby in her arms. She was very concerned about the child, which made many people suspicious, but at that time no one seemed to notice. The reasons behind Megan leaving Heidi's body in the trunk of her car instead of hiding it elsewhere remain unclear. In court, Megan continued to insist that the child Margot was hers. During a psychiatric evaluation, she was diagnosed with bipolar disorder and post-traumatic stress disorder. However, she was ultimately deemed sane and competent to stand trial. Throughout the trial, the evidence overwhelmingly pointed to her guilt, indicating that she had carefully planned the murder over several months. Following her lawyer's advice, Megan agreed to a plea bargain with the prosecution in order to receive a lighter sentence. To avoid the death penalty, she gave up her right to appeal. Heidi's family agreed to the decision to avoid protracted legal battles. Megan Fire-Muska was sentenced to 55 years in prison without the possibility of parole. The case of Scarlett Keeling. Scarlett Keeling was born in July 1992 in Great Britain. Her mother, Fiona, has 9 children from 5 different men. However, none of the men among them care about the lives of Fiona and children. The family relied primarily on state benefits for support, and Fiona also worked part-time. The children were homeschooled and lived in a poor area of Devon, UK. They live in a small house and some trailers. Fiona's first child was a boy named Hallandale Moose, who was 19 years old. Next is Silas, 17 years old, and then Scarlett, 15 years old. These 3 children were from Richard Keeling, who was of Levitsa descent and worked in a construction company. When Fiona and Richard's relationship began, they lived near each other in Hartford, but they separated shortly after Scarlett's birth. 2 girls, Marilyn and Kitty, were born a little over a year apart. At the time of the tragedy, Marilyn was 13 years old and Kitty was 12. Their father, Chris Osborne, was a trader. However, Fiona and Chris' relationship quickly ended. After them, 2 more children were born, AK and K, who was 9 at the time of the tragedy. Their biological father was Paul, a market trader. He met Fiona while she was trading in London. At that time, she was selling army equipment. Her relationship with Paul was brief, but it was he who took her to the Devon area. Devon has more spacious properties, suitable for Fiona's large family. She hoped to create a better environment for her children. However, her relationship with Paul quickly began to deteriorate after the move. They had frequent disagreements and serious conflicts, yet they continued living together to avoid paying rent. Eventually, they were evicted, which marked the end of their relationship. During this time, Fiona met Adam Foster, a contractor who specialized in flooring. He was the father of her last 2 children, Trinity and Aurora. They were born a year apart. But Fiona and Adam's relationship didn't last long. The large family had to squeeze into a small apartment provided by the state. Fiona found herself alone and had to take care of 9 children by herself. Most of the time, she homeschooled them. However, sometimes they start attending public schools when their family circumstances become more favorable. During this period, the Keeling family was described as decent and polite, showing no signs that their mother mistreated them. As the teenagers grew up, their living conditions were challenging. Fiona did her best to provide for them, but raising 9 children on her own was nearly impossible. She also faced problems with alcohol and substance addiction, although she tried to protect her children from these harmful habits. Unfortunately, They lived in marginal areas where drug use was common, and this environment negatively influenced her children. Scarlett grows up and gradually becomes interested in the more rebellious aspects of life. Fiona was aware that Scarlett had smoked weed several times. Some of Scarlett's friends have mentioned that she has been attending parties with untrustworthy friends. She frequently smoked and drank alcohol. Her mother, Fiona, noted that she appeared older than her age. By 14, she had started dating boys. Upon discovering this, Fiona advised that she should buy birth control pills, as Fiona wanted to protect her children from potential troubles in early pregnancies. Scarlett was described by her relatives as an active and cheerful girl who was beautiful and drew a lot of attention. She had a passion for horses and swimming. She also dreamed of joining a group of artists to pursue creative work. In 2006, Fiona began a relationship with Rob Clark, a man who was wealthier than her previous partners. A year later, they started planning a trip to India with the children, specifically to the famous resort of Goa, which they had long wanted to visit. Rob had been to Goa many times and loved it. For Fiona, this trip will be very interesting, as she had never traveled outside the UK. The trip promised to be a significant experience for the entire family. However, she hesitated for a long time. She worried not only about the trip, but also about the large amount of money that needs to be spent. Her eldest son chose to remain in Britain due to document issues. She didn't want to rely entirely on Rob, so she decided to contribute to the trip costs herself. She used her savings, sold some belongings, and also drew from her benefits. After much preparation, packing, and financial planning, the family was finally ready and very excited about their upcoming adventure. The trip started in November 2007. Rob, Fiona, and 8 children visited Anjuna in Goa. This was the first destination on their itinerary. Anjuna is a peaceful coastal town known for its beautiful beaches and rich hippie culture. The area also hosts large parties at numerous clubs, creating a relaxed atmosphere with plenty of entertainment options. At first, they enjoyed the warm weather, the ocean, and the laid-back lifestyle. However, by early February, they grew tired of the constant noise and parties in Anjuna and wanted to explore other regions of India. Everyone agreed to move on, except for Scarlett. During her time in Anjuna, she met Julio Lobo, a local guide, who organized excursions. Then, they quickly became a friend. She helped promote his activities by distributing flyers and accompanied him on trips as an assistant. She even considered staying behind to continue this work and enjoy her time on the beach, but Fiona disagreed with her decision. Nevertheless, Scarlett knew how to persuade Fiona that this would be a positive experience. She would learn to be independent, enjoy a break, and work to earn some money. Fiona then agreed to let her stay with her friend Julio. She promised to attend fewer parties and avoid going out alone at night. With this resolved, Fiona, Rob, and the 7 other children set off on a tour to different cities. In fact, India is often ranked as one of the most dangerous countries. Numerous crimes occur here, especially against women, making it very risky for a girl to be alone. In early February 2008, the Keeling family was faced with a tragic incident. In mid-February, their eldest son, 19 years old Hallandale, was hit by a car while crossing the street in the UK. He was taken to the hospital with serious injuries. Upon hearing the news, Fiona and the rest of the Keeling family began making plans to return home to support him. On February 17th, Scarlett met with her family and began packing. During this time, she had expressed a desire to attend a party for St. Lee's Day. Although her mother was against it, but she managed to persuade her to let her go. She told her mother she would return by midnight after saying goodbye to her friends. After her mother agreed, she left the house with Julio. her mother unaware that this would be the last time she would see her daughter and that the party would lead to a tragic outcome. Until that moment, Scarlett's life on the coast followed a typical daily routine. She distributed leaflets for Julio and sometimes acted as his guide. She also served food and worked part-time on the beach. In the evenings, the party scene began. The 15-year-old girl, Scarlett, having earned some money, went out to enjoy herself. She attended the party until midnight, then she went back to Julio's aunt's house, where he was living. She quickly adapted to this lively lifestyle. She seemed happy and didn't want to leave. However, her plans changed when she realized her older brother, Hallandale, needed help. She couldn't abandon him in his time of trouble, so she decided to return to her family. Despite this, she chose to enjoy one last night out. Julio, feeling tired and unwell, decided to stay home. But Scarlett went out with Julio's 16-year-old sister and their friend Ruby for one final party before their vacation ended. Scarlett admitted to having a romantic relationship with Julio. He had even bought her a motorcycle. This revelation surprised Ruby, especially since Scarlett had just turned 15 and Julio was 10 years older. They visited a local bar and then moved to several other places, drinking moderately at each one. After midnight, they planned to head home. Scarlett, however, intended to return to her family rather than stay at Ruby's house, as her family had already come back for her. They chatted a bit longer and say goodbye, promising to keep in touch after Scarlett returned to Great Britain. Scarlett also planned to visit the resort again in the future to see her friends. Unfortunately, this plan was never realized, as no one ever saw her alive again. Scarlett never returned home, and at that time, no one was looking for her. Her mother, Fiona, thought she would return to Julio in the morning. However, she was still missing the next day. On February 18, 2008, the morning after the party, passers-by discovered the half-naked body of a girl on the beach. They quickly notified the police, who identified the deceased as a 15-year-old girl. Fiona has been facing depression because of the health situation of her son, Hallandale. Overwhelmed with horror, Fiona regained her composure and rushed to the scene of the tragedy. During the initial investigation, police stated that the body was found floating in the water, leading them to conclude that the cause of death was accidental drowning. However, there were clear signs of violence and abuse on the body. Despite this evidence, law enforcement in India believed she had gotten drunk on the beach, fallen asleep, and drowned. Naturally, Fiona protested this conclusion and was determined to seek justice. Fiona spent weeks searching for answers to prompt an investigation and review of the case. She even took photographs of Scarlett's body at the morgue to record evidence, fearing that the incident would be covered up. The police insisted it was an accident and seemed more focused on minimizing the incident to avoid scaring off tourists and damaging the resort's reputation. Fiona believes that the numerous bruises and severe injuries on Scarlett's body indicate that she died as a result of violence. She was also certain that her daughter had been raped. However, the investigators explained the missing clothing by saying it had been washed away by the waves. The police attributed the bruises on Scarlett's head to her hitting rocks underwater. It seemed the authorities had not thoroughly looked for her belongings. After speaking with several witnesses and examining the area where Scarlett was found, Fiona surprisingly discovered evidence that the police had overlooked. Specifically, she found several pieces of Scarlett's clothing hidden in the bushes nearby on the beach. The second investigation, along with a toxicology test, took place a month after Scarlett's death. By the end of the year, analysis showed that her system contained alcohol and drugs. Furthermore, she had over 50 violent injuries, including cuts and bruises, indicating a violent cause of death. The amount of water found in her lungs was too low to conclude that she died by drowning. It seemed more likely that the water entered her lungs after death. possibly while attempts were made to dispose of her body. A detailed toxicology analysis of the blood revealed the presence of both mild and severe prohibited substances. This makes one wonder how these substances could have entered her body if, according to relatives, she only smoked. Interviews with witnesses helped investigators piece together the incident of that tragic night when Scarlett left her friend Ruby. They spoke to a witness named Mike. He was from London and was on holiday in Goa. He reported seeing Scarlett around 3 a.m. as she entered the bar. She was very drunk, walked unsteadily, and incoherent speech. She fell in front of the entrance, and others helped her get up. She quickly attracted the attention of several men, but the bar owner prevented anyone from approaching her. Later, she went to the back of the kitchen, and she spoke with two Indian men for about an hour. Mike believed she knew them, and he suspected that she was drinking and possibly using drugs during that time. Mike is aware that this beach is dangerous because of the high number of sexual assaults and the increase in gang activity. Although drug sales were illegal, drugs were readily available in many places. A witness reported seeing Scarlett leave the bar with a local man around 4:30 a.m. When Mike left the bar about half an hour later, he noticed the man pulling Scarlett into the bushes. Since she did not resist or scream, Mike assumed they were consenting to have sex, so he did not intervene and left the scene. Based on this information, the police arrested two employees of the bar, Samson de Souza and Solani Plato Carvalho, on March 2, 2008, on suspicion of murder. On June 5, the case was handed over to the Central Bureau of Investigation. Samson and Solani were charged with murder, rape, drug use, and cruelty to a minor. Additional charges for attempting to destroy evidence were later added. Unfortunately, the Indian justice system moved slowly, and the trial in Goa was not scheduled until March 2010. 2 years later. During this time, preparations for the trial continued, and law enforcement interviewed 72 witnesses. However, just days before the trial was set to begin, the case was unexpectedly suspended. Samson and Solani still maintain that they had nothing to do with Scarlett's death, and there is currently no direct evidence against them. All evidence has been destroyed. The prosecutor's office to continue contacting witnesses. By 2013, they had selected 30 individuals who could help clarify the timeline of incident from that tragic night. The most important witness in this case is Mike, who witnessed the violence against Scarlett, but he did not realize it was happening against her will. Unfortunately, in April 2012, he refused to return to testify in court. Later, he told the media that he was afraid to come back to the country where the crime occurred because he feared for his safety, he believing that local gangs were involved. There were rumors that Mike had been threatened, and the Indian authorities even opened a criminal case against him regarding what he witnessed that night. However, his testimony was deemed unreliable. Fiona was shocked by Mike's behavior and labeled him a coward. Fiona believed that he could have saved Scarlett when he saw her being dragged into the bushes or helped bring the perpetrators to justice. However, he chose not to do so. She was so heartbroken, she even tried to meet Mike in England and take a video as evidence in court, but her efforts were unsuccessful. The police appear to be obstructing the pursuit of justice. They are still looking for reasons to blame Scarlett for the death. For instance, they pointed to her diary entries where she expressed her desire to leave Anjuna and return home. The detectives interpreted this as a sign of depression, hinting that she is trying to stay away from life. This thing seemed aimed at closing the case, despite the fact that Scarlett had never shown any signs of mental health issues or intent to end her life. The hearings were delayed for 8 years, during which Fiona was constantly in the media spotlight. She had to address numerous rumors and gossip. On September 23, 2016, Samson and Solani were acquitted due to insufficient evidence. Fiona was present during the sentencing and was devastated by the court's decision. After years of waiting, Samson and Solony were found not guilty. Fiona accused the police of corruption and she planned to take the case to higher courts. She vowed to keep fighting for justice for her deceased daughter, Scarlett. Attorneys representing Samson and Solony argued that from the outset, the Central Bureau of Investigation lacked evidence. They maintained that Scarlett's death was either a voluntary end to her life or an accident. However, the medical evidence that showed she had 52 injuries, most of which she could not have inflicted on herself. The defense claimed that no one had given the girl illegal drugs, rather, she had taken them on her own. Fiona felt a deep sense of injustice. Fiona had to wait 4 years to retrieve Scarlett's body and give her a proper burial. Fiona hoped for a fair court ruling. It felt as though she had lost, and she returned to the UK unexpectedly. In February 2017, the court's decision was appealed. It was demonstrated that the judge failed to comply with the deadlines for hearings. As a result, both suspects, Samson and Solony, were once again under investigation. The prosecutor's office in Njuna began investigating the possibility that Samson and Solony deliberately administered drugs and alcohol to Scarlett in an attempt to rape her. During the hearing, a witness stated that at about 3 a.m., she saw Scarlett trying to get a ride, maybe to go home. However, none of the drivers stopped for her. She then went to a beach bar, where Samson and Solony had promised to give her a ride after their shift ended at 5 a.m. She decided to wait for them there. It is believed that Samson slipped some narcotic into her drink so that he could easily rape her. Further investigation revealed that Samson was involved in the illegal drug trade on the beach, which meant he was always carrying drugs. During the hearings, his defense lawyer denied that Samson had any involvement in the murder, arguing that it was an accident. The lawyer tried to undermine the prosecution's case, but by then, the police had gathered enough testimony and evidence to implicate Samson in the brutal killing of Scarlett. The defense attorney successfully demonstrated that Solony was not guilty. He had a lot of communication with Scarlett that evening, but he left on his scooter before she departed with Samson. Therefore, Solony's charges were dropped, leading to his acquittal. In contrast, Samson faced a more serious outcome. On July 19, 2019, the Supreme Court of Bonn convicted Samson de Souza on 5 charges, including premeditated murder, rape, inciting Scarlett, a teenager, to use hard drugs, and attempting to conceal evidence of murder. Finally, Fiona found justice after nearly 11 years of unremitting efforts. But the outcome was disappointing. Samson received a sentence of only 10 years in prison for his heinous crimes, which many felt was too lenient. Despite this, Fiona was relieved that her efforts were not in vain and that the criminal faced some punishment for his actions. After 11 years, Samson still maintains his innocence, despite the court's decision. Fiona not only sought justice for Scarlett's murder but also faced scrutiny from the courts and child protection services. There was even talk of removing her custody of all her children, labeling her as a neglectful mother. However, this is not the biggest problem for the family. Tragically, before Samson's final trial, Fiona's eldest son, Hallandale Keeling, died after taking a massive dose of morphine. Fiona explained that Hallandale was very close to his younger sister Scarlett and couldn't cope with her rape and murder. He had felt guilty for not traveling to India with his family and believed he could have protected Scarlett. Additionally, he was also very sad that his sister's killer had not been punished for such a long time. Scarlett's reputation was severely damaged because of Rob. He provided information that contradicted Fiona's account. He claimed that by the second month in Goa, Scarlett had spent all her money on drugs and alcohol, forcing him and her family to survive on just one bowl of rice a day. Rob alleged that she used drugs openly in front of her family and that Julio had attempted to forcibly take her just days after they arrived at another beach. He suggested that Fiona allowed this because she could receive money for Scarlett, implying that Fiona had abandoned her. Fiona, however, vigorously rejected these claims, insisting they were mere rumors. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Matthew Turner Fisher. After the tragic death of his wife, Ernest Fisher was left to care for 4 children, all of whom were now adults. However, some members of the family were traumatized by the loss of their mother. Initially, this was considered a normal response to grief, as everyone processes loss differently. Some people may be overwhelmed by grief, leading to disturbing behaviors. Ernest was a retired man living a quiet life in the southern suburbs of Parallel, near Perth, Australia. The family lived modestly, with Ernest raising his 4 children on his own. His eldest son, Joshua, was 26 in 2016 and dedicated his free time to studying for a programming diploma. The second son, Matthew, was 23 and worked as a freight carrier. His third daughter, Hannah, 20, is studying design and spends all her free time studying. The youngest daughter, Sylvia, 16, is still in high school. Ernest's wife passed away 2 years prior to the events described, in 2014, due to cancer. Her death was a significant tragedy for the entire family. On her deathbed, she asked her son Matthew to take care of his siblings and to support their father as he aged. Matthew agreed to this promise. Like the rest of the family, he felt a deep sadness over their loss. However, shortly after their mother's death, the household began to deteriorate rapidly. Ernest lost his job, which led to a lack of finances. Within months, the situation became chaotic, with furniture and books scattered throughout every room. It is important to note that the youngest daughter was not involved in the events described. In contrast, Matthew was a sociable and attractive young man who was popular with girls. His turbulent personal life set him apart from his siblings. Unlike his siblings, who spent most of their time studying, Matthew was active and independent. He regularly went to the gym and participated in many outdoor sports such as soccer, basketball, and volleyball. He was also the only one in the family with a job, which allowed him to maintain his interests. In contrast, his siblings were quite shy. Hannah and Joshua preferred to spend their time alone studying and rarely interacted with each other, leading to a strained relationship between the children. On Monday, October 3, 2016, 23-year-old Matthew Fisher failed to report to work, which was unusual for him. He had always been a responsible employee, the sole provider for his family, and he never missed a shift. Concerned, his colleagues and friends tried to contact him, but their efforts were in vain. They then reached out to his family for information about his whereabouts. Matthew's father seemed unconcerned and jokingly shared a story about how Matthew had run away to travel in Eastern Australia with a wealthy girl he had admired from a magazine cover. This story is told by Joshua and Hannah as told by their father. Matthew's friends were suspicious of the situation. Matthew had never thought about it before. Matthew's car was at home, why didn't he drive away? His friends suspected Matthew's father and other family members of lying, but Ernest only responded with cheerful jokes. Later, Matthew's friends even tried to enter his house to gather any information about Matthew, but they were unsuccessful. They suspected something was wrong and believed that Matthew would not simply run away from home. They knew about his difficult relationship with his family, who often criticized him and felt jealous. At that time, Matthew also did not have a girlfriend, so his friends continued to search for clues about what really happened to him. They discovered that Matthew had gone missing on October 1st. He had failed to show up for an appointment with a friend and had not contacted anyone since. Meanwhile, Matthew's phone remained silent, causing his friends to worry, but his family seemed unconcerned. They stopped looking for him and ceased all contact. 17 days after his disappearance. Matthew's friends went to the police to report him missing and share their concerns about how his family was acting. The police took their statements and attempted to call Matthew, but his phone was turned off, making it impossible to locate him. The police quickly contacted Matthew's father, Ernest. He repeated the story he had shared with Matthew's friends, that Matthew had run off with a new girlfriend. However, the police found Ernest's lack of concern for his son suspicious. They believed Matthew's car was still at the house, making it impossible for him to leave without it. Additionally, they were unable to find the new girlfriend. After reviewing Matthew's messages, the police found no evidence to support the father's story. On October 22nd, they called Ernest into the police station for questioning. He initially stands by his statement, but when the police confront him about Matthew's death, claiming that they have substantial evidence, Ernest's story begins to become confusing. The police indicated that they had good reason to believe that Matthew was dead and had not left the house. At the 90th minute of interrogation, Ernest took a short break and then suddenly confessed that he killed his son because he had been swearing at him and insulting him. Ernest claimed he felt there was no other solution and could only think of murder. Ernest said that Matthew frequently threatened to use violence against Ernest and Matthew's siblings. Ernest also mentioned that Matthew often accused him of not getting his mother to the hospital in time for cancer treatment, which might have saved her, and blamed him for her death. This blame frustrated Ernest. After speaking with Ernest's other children, Joshua and Hannah, the police discovered that they were also present at the crime scene and assisted their father in covering up the incident. On October 1st, 2016, a tragic event occurred. On that day, Ernest had planned to drive to a friend's house to watch the final of a football match. At the same time, his son Matthew needed a car to run some errands. Although Matthew had his own car, the situation caused a conflict between them, leading to a horrific incident that occurred between 11 o'clock and 11:30 in the morning. Unable to bear the argument with his son, Ernest went to the stables in the backyard and took 2 knives. When he returned home, he found Matthew in Joshua's room and attacked him, inflicting multiple stab wounds. One knife pierced Matthew's heart and lung. After the attack, Ernest left the room, leaving his son bleeding on the floor. Meanwhile, his other children, Joshua and Hannah, were eating lunch in the living room. They ran to the sound and found Matthew lying on the floor, covered in blood and unresponsive. Hannah suggested they call the police, but her father strongly opposed the idea. Ernest managed to convince her not to go through with it. Instead, he went into the backyard to dig a grave while Hannah and Joshua remained frozen in place. Ernest, standing beside his dead son, is more worried about missing a soccer game with his friends than losing his son. After digging the grave, Ernest returned to the house and spoke to his children. He asked them to help clean up the crime scene and bury Matthew in the backyard while he was away. He then calmly got ready and left to enjoy a soccer game with his friends, seemingly without remorse for having just harmed a family member. Remarkably, Hannah and Joshua complied with their father's request. They meticulously cleaned up the blood in the room with cleaning supplies. The room was covered in blood, with bloodstains on the walls and furniture, indicative of the brutal attack on his son. Fearing a similar fate, Joshua and Hannah followed their father's orders without question. They first used bleach to wipe down the walls, then the furniture, carpets, and floors. They cleaned the room thoroughly and burned anything that could not be wiped clean to remove potential evidence. As Joshua and Hannah entered the backyard, they decided to dig deeper than the grave their father had hastily dug. This was important to ensure the body was more securely hidden. Since Matthew was quite large, they had difficulty moving him. They dragged him on a stepladder and across the lawn to the grave, where they dumped him and buried him unceremoniously. They then returned home, showered, changed their clothes, and cleaned up the area. Ernest returned home about 5 hours later. He checked to make sure the children had cleaned up the blood in the room and disposed of the body, and he praised them for their efforts. The youngest daughter, Sylvia, 16, was visiting relatives on the day of the murder and did not witness the horrific incident. When asked how hard he stabbed his son, Ernest replied, "Very hard. Because he wanted to stab his son to death. If Matthew had attacked back, Ernest will die. Because Matthew was stronger than him." When the police asked Ernest how many injuries he had caused to his son, he replied, he should dig him up and find out. When told he was going to be arrested for murder, Ernest laughed and joked, showing no concern about the situation. The police asked him why he had not considered other options for dealing with his son. Ernest claimed that he had no other choice. The police suggested he could have contacted the police to help remove his son from their home or sought a safe place for his family. Ernest laughed again, saying he didn't want to spend money and was against moving. He viewed killing his son as the only way to free his family. After this admission, he led the police to the location of the body. Upon searching the family's yard, they discovered the Matthew buried there, as the father had indicated. A month had passed since Matthew's disappearance, and only 10 days had gone by since his friends reported it to the police. The most shocking part was that the father, while giving his testimony, laughed and joked about his murdered son, showing no remorse for his actions. He firmly believed he was justified. Ernest, 65, Joshua, 26, and Hannah, 20, were all arrested and charged with murder and concealing the body. Matthew was later buried next to his mother. Funds were raised to cover the funeral costs, supplemented by Matthew's savings. He bought a large headstone for his mother, while the rest of his family seemed unconcerned, not even having a headstone. Police were skeptical of the motive given. Ernest considered Matthew a danger to the entire family, leading him to decide to eliminate him. Friends and acquaintances of the Matthew consistently described him as a good person who had never exhibited aggression or violence. It was puzzling that if Matthew truly posed a threat to the family, they had never filed a complaint with the police prior to this tragedy. The police interviewed all members of the Ernest family to uncover the true motives and piece together the sequence of events. The police spoke to Ernest again, who claimed that Matthew was a cruel and dangerous man who regularly used drugs. He said that he had to kill Matthew to end the atmosphere of fear that Matthew had created in their family. Joshua was very emotional during the interview. He cried as he described the image of the crime scene and younger brother's bloody body in his mind. In the room, he saw his father holding 2 knives and standing over Matthew's body. He did not see the struggle or the moment of the murder. Hannah remained composed during her interrogation but repeatedly recounted the same story. She expressed concerns that her brother Matthew was very different from the rest of the family and could be a threat. He had often yelled at her and had used physical force once during their teenage years when they got into a fight. However, Hannah could not point to any other incidents that proved Matthew was dangerous. She admitted that she felt remorse and guilt over the situation. Hannah wished she could go back in time and call the police immediately after the incident. At that moment, Joshua and Hannah were afraid of their angry father and did not speak up against him. However, they could not understand why they continued to live with Ernest and their Matthew's body in the yard as if nothing had happened. If they felt guilty, why didn't they go to the police later on? The hearing for the case began in mid-2018, and it took 2 years for the investigation to gather and analyze all the materials. During the trial, the Ernest and their defense argued that the murder was an act of self-defense, claiming that Matthew posed a serious threat to the entire family. The lawyers for the Ernest spoke negatively about the Matthew, portraying him as a violent and aggressive person who had attacked them. However, no one provided convincing evidence of Matthew's aggression or any real threat he had posed. No one noticed any bruises on Hannah or Joshua, and it is unclear what caused the family conflict or whether Ernest was the one who started it. It is also worrying that Ernest chose to kill his loved one rather than seek police help to resolve the issue or simply remove him from the house if he truly posed a threat. In court, Ernest Fisher appeared unusually calm, which raised suspicions. He did not seem to show any remorse for what had happened and did not feel any sadness for his son. Ernest was often rude in court, insulting everyone involved, and was frequently reprimanded for his behavior. Family acquaintances described Ernest as a ruthless person, and several testified that they had never seen Matthew show any hostility toward his relatives. His friends disputed Ernest's testimony, insisting that Matthew was not aggressive and did not use drugs. Matthew regularly underwent random drug and alcohol testing at work and had never had any problems. Friends noted that after their mother's death, Matthew's relationship with their father and siblings became very strained. Joshua and Hannah were often depressed. They rarely left the house, rarely changed clothes, did not work, and kept the house in disarray. They hardly communicated with each other and were heavily dependent on Matthew for support. Matthew had to take on the role of primary provider for the family. Initially, he understood the situation, but this temporary role lasted too long. Joshua and Hannah were content with their current situation and did not want to look for work. Matthew felt frustrated with his family because he was tired of being responsible for the other adult members of the family, which felt like a burden. Despite his efforts to comfort them, they were in vain. They preferred to live a closed life, relying on him, and creating more tension in their relationships. Matthew's friends dismissed the idea that he was aggressive or hurtful to his father. Although he could have stayed away from his family's problems for a long time, he chose to stay and support them. He promised his mother before she died that he would take care of them. Matthew, like anyone else, can sometimes lose his temper during arguments. However, he doesn't seem to be a cruel or violent person. He even has a tattoo on his arm that says, "Family is everything." Despite the many testimonies presented by the prosecution, Ernest's lawyer maintained that the father had acted in self-defense. Meanwhile, Matthew's siblings believed their father killed him to protect them, and they supported him during the trial. They were not charged as accomplices to the murder. Instead, they faced charges related to the disposal of the body and evidence. Further information suggested that Ernest had been planning to eliminate his son for a long time. It was discovered that he had purchased 2 knives well in advance, which he had saved specifically for the act of stabbing Matthew, indicating a premeditated intent. At the end of a 3-week trial, the jury reached a verdict. After deliberating for 2 hours, Ernest Fisher was found guilty of premeditated murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 18 years. Ernest showed no emotion when the sentence was announced. The judge also highlighted that the defendant did not show any remorse for his actions and criticized Ernest for forcing his children into a horrific choice. He should not have placed the children in such a difficult situation. Joshua and Hannah, out of deep loyalty and fear of their father, made a poor decision. The judge noted that one of the worst experiences for anyone is to be harmed by their own loving family. Joshua Fisher received a 4-year sentence with the possibility of parole after 2 years, while Hannah was sentenced to 3 years and 8 months, eligible for parole after 22 months. The case of Lauren Heike. Lauren Heike was born on November 20th, 1993, in Cedo, Washington, USA, into a wealthy family. Her father owned a plumbing company, and her mother worked in real estate. She was close with her brother, Ryan. She graduated from Silver Daily High School in Washington and then moved to Phoenix, Arizona, to study cosmetology and skin care. She began working at 18 and built a successful career. Her first job was as a customer service representative. In 2015, she became a leading manager at the well-known company Benefit, where she worked for 5 years. Afterward, She worked as a cosmetologist in a beauty salon for 9 months. In October 2020, she took a manager position at a center for aesthetic medicine. She planned to follow her mother's path in real estate and wanted to explore that field. At the time of the tragedy, she was working as a full-time instructor at a golf club. Lauren was never afraid of challenges and never got discouraged. She easily connected with new colleagues and was very responsible. She is actively involved in the fields of beauty, sports, and real estate. Everyone who knew her described her as bright, kind, and humorous. Lauren is in good health, plays sports regularly, and leads an active, healthy lifestyle. She has many good friends and spends most of her free time going out with them. She also loved to travel. Every day, after waking up, she has the habit of going for a walk. She found joy in even the simplest things, like a morning walk or a cup of coffee at breakfast. Tragically, Lauren's life ended at just 29 years old. Her loved ones are deeply saddened by her passing. On April 28, 2023, she started her day as usual. After waking up, she had coffee, spoke with family and friends on the phone, and prepared for a walk. Her route was that she passed through North Phoenix, near her apartment. As always, she intended to enjoy the fresh air and recharge for the day. This walk in the park is her favorite, as it gives her a path to reflect in quiet space. However, on that day, she didn't return home from her walk. Later, Lauren's colleagues and friends grew concerned when she didn't show up at work. This behavior is unlike her, as she usually lets others know if she is unwell and unable to go to work. She didn't call anyone, and she also didn't answer calls or messages from people. Her family also sensed something was wrong when she didn't contact them after the walk. This is unusual and worrying. Unable to reach her, relatives called the police and reported she missing. The police took the statement and went to Lauren's house to investigate. When the officers arrived at her house, she wasn't there. They looked through the windows but saw no one inside. Since she lived alone, there was no one to provide information about her daily routine. After checking the house, the officers found no signs of a break-in or anything suspicious. It seemed as if she had just left and never returned, possibly encountering trouble elsewhere. Lauren could not be reached, so police stepped up their search. They contacted all of her acquaintances, but no one had seen her that day. The search for Lauren began, and it wasn't long before she was found. The next day, April 29th, around 11 a.m., her body was discovered on her favorite walking path, the same one she had visited on the day she went missing. A resident of a nearby apartment complex, who was also her neighbor, out walking their dog, found her body. The dog led its owner to the location. The area was difficult to see clearly. Because of this, no passers-by discovered her body on the day of her death. Lauren, who often walked along this route with a neighbor, became a victim. The neighbor was shocked to find her and immediately called the police to report it. She described the body as having wounds that looked like knife stabs. The police quickly arrived, secured the scene, and forensic experts began searching for evidence. Authorities informed Lauren's family that her body might have been found and asked them to come for identification. Lauren's family identified her immediately. However, the official identification results were announced on May 1st. Her body was sent for an autopsy, and the forensic expert determined she was stabbed to death around 11 a.m. on April 28, 2023, the day she disappeared. The autopsy showed she had about 15 stab wounds, all on the upper body, with a deep stab in the back being fatal. The knife went in approximately 8 centimeters. Based on the wounds, the expert suggested that a penknife was used in the murder. Lauren fiercely fought for her life, which was evident from the multiple stab wounds on her hands, typical of defensive actions. There were also minor cuts and abrasions all over her body, showing her death was painful and prolonged. She attempted to defend herself and resist, but the attacker was more powerful. Furthermore, the surprise element of the attack may have played an important role, since she was suddenly attacked by a couple. While forensic experts were conducting the autopsy, the police continued to thoroughly investigate the murder scene. They discovered the reason for the numerous abrasions on Lauren's body. Along the path she had been walking, there was a barbed wire fence. It seems she attempted to crawl through it to escape, but couldn't succeed, resulting in her torn clothes and multiple abrasions and bruises. Additionally, at the crime scene, items were found that she had taken with her on her walk. Because the area where Lauren's body was found is near residential areas, so there was a high likelihood that both she and culprit were captured on surveillance cameras. The police obtained the necessary footage and thoroughly reviewed the incident of that morning. They discovered a video segment showing Lauren walking along a path around 10:52 a.m. She is calmly passing the area covered by the camera. About 22 seconds later, a tall, thin man dressed in a light t-shirt and dark shorts, carrying a backpack, is seen running behind her. However, he quickly vanished into the wooded area. A few minutes later, the same man from the recording exited the park and ran in the opposite direction. It was clear he was trying to cross the barbed wire fence, but quickly disappeared from the camera's view. No one else was present at the time, making him the main suspect in the case. Police reviewed security camera footage and identified the suspect, but ran into a major problem. The video quality was so poor, so it was impossible to identify the person's face or any features. The only clue was that he appeared to be a young black man. These recordings were shown on local television in hopes that someone could identify he. Several people have contacted the police with information. Although the information verification process took quite a while, no important clues were found. The police needed to analyze all Lauren's belongings found at the crime scene. Near the barbed wire fence, detectives discovered shoes. DNA analysis of her shoes revealed DNA that did not belong to her, likely belonging to the attacker. It was assumed that the attacker grabbed she by the leg, leaving his DNA behind. The sample was sent to the lab for further examination. After analyzing the results, the police uploaded the DNA test findings to their database. They found a match. The DNA belonged to 22-year-old Zion William Teasley, who had a previous criminal record. He had never held a steady job. A detailed review of his criminal history showed a series of convictions starting in 2020. However, the current charges were the most serious among his offenses. He had been involved in several assaults, burglaries, armed robberies, and minor acts of vandalism. In 2021, the police obtained his confession for the crimes he committed. In exchange, many of his intoxication charges, totaling about 10, were dismissed. He served 16 months in prison and was released in November 2022. The prosecutor's office encouraged him to cooperate with the investigation. Even though his DNA was on Lauren's shoes, that doesn't mean he's the killer. His DNA might have accidentally ended up on Lauren's shoes. This was not enough to arrest and charge he. More convincing evidence was needed. Therefore, detectives decided to examine his mobile phone. Officers tracked the location of Zion's mobile phone. The phone records showed it was in the area where Lauren was killed, at about the same time in the morning. Moreover, the route taken by Zion's phone matched exactly with the movements of the person seen on video. Doubts about Zion grew, but this evidence was not enough to convict him. So, the officers canvassed the area, questioning residents of nearby houses. They hoped to find people who knew the suspect and were able to identify him in the camera footage. Several local residents confirmed that the man in the video resembled Zion. Detectives consulted Zion's acquaintances, and they provided useful information. They revealed that he owned a penknife with a blade exactly 8 centimeters long, closely matching the weapon used in the murder. During the investigation, Zion remained placed on probation for a previous assault conviction. Just 5 days after Lauren's murder, he reported to the police department as required. Officers decided to speak with his probation officer. The officer mentioned that Zion appeared nervous during their last meet, as if he was anxious about something. When shown CCTV footage of the suspect, the probation officer said that the person resembled Zion in both physique and appearance and wore similar headphones. However, the officer couldn't be completely certain that the person on camera was the same as the one Zion. Soon after, the police decided to question Zion, the prime suspect. This meeting occurred on May 4th at his residence in Teasley, located on North Scottsdale Route, just a 5-minute walk from where Lauren was murdered. The police met Zion and asked him to come in for questioning. He agreed and accompanied them to the station, and he was shown CCTV footage of Lauren and suspect. During the interrogation, he became nervous, frequently changed his story. Initially, he claimed he had never seen Lauren, but he later insisted that he was not the person in the CCTV footage and denied any involvement in the murder. Police discovered contradiction in Zion's statement during the first interrogation. He confessed to the attack, but maintained that at the time, he was not aware of his actions. He explained that he had a difficult childhood, growing up in a poor family where he was bullied. To survive, he resorted to stealing and eventually committed other crimes. The motives for the attack on Lauren, as well as some details, remain unknown and are being kept secret. After the attack, while the investigation was still ongoing, he went on the run and tried to hide his identity. He noticed that the news frequently covered the murder and showed surveillance footage. So, he decided to flee the city. However, he was arrested before he could escape. After Zion's arrest, police found a plane ticket to Detroit in his house, which supported his plan to escape. 6 days after the attack, the police capturing him. If he had fled to another state, it would have been much more challenging to catch and convict him. During their investigation, police uncovered issues with Zion's employment. They contacted the clothing store where he worked, but the manager revealed that he had been fired just days before the murder. The employer noted his aggressive behavior at work and suspected him of involvement in thefts from the store. This suspicion was confirmed by surveillance footage, showing he caught on camera with stolen items from the store. Consequently, he was terminated, although the store did not report him to the police. Zion was charged with first-degree murder on May 4, 2023. The prosecutor identified signs of premeditation in Lauren's murder and noted intentions of fleeing to another state. As a result, bail was set at $1 million, an amount he could not afford, leading to his continued imprisonment. Besides the murder charge, Zion faces accusations of violating terms related to placed on probation. Lauren's family expressed gratitude to Phoenix police for quickly apprehending an individual who posed a major threat to society, preventing further harm. They believe such dangerous individuals should be isolated permanently and have asked for life imprisonment. What do the injuries inflicted on Laura suggest? They show that there was no connection between her and Zion. They weren't acquainted, had no communication, and shared no mutual friends. Thus, Laura was in no way the one who made him aggressive, she just accidentally became the target of this evil person. If Zion is found guilty, he could face the death penalty. Arizona enforces the death sentence and is the only U.S. state that still uses gas chamber suffocation as a method of execution. Although this method is legally available in California, Missouri, and Wyoming, their gas chambers have been dismantled. Gas suffocation is considered inhumane because it causes a slow, terrifying, and painful death. The last person executed this way in Arizona was Walter Lagrand in 1999, who was convicted for murdering a bank manager. He suffered convulsions for 18 minutes in the gas chamber. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another horrible case. The case of Linda Cooney. On June 28, 2011, at approximately 8:30 a.m., Linda Cooney called the Las Vegas police. She was in a panic, reporting that her son Kevin had been shot in the neck and needed immediate help. When police and an ambulance arrived at their home, they found Kevin Cooney, 30, lying on the living room floor, bleeding. They quickly provided him with medical assistance. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they found several unusual details. Ammunition and weapons were scattered across the floor, which was not typical. They determined that the Kevin had been shot with Linda's pistol, but she could not identify who fired the weapon. There were no signs of forced entry into the house, and nothing appeared to be stolen, so they ruled out robbery as a motive. Linda was 63 years old at the time. She remained calm during the police interrogation. The interrogation lasted about an hour and was recorded. Linda insisted that she did not know who shot her son and denied any involvement, despite pressure from the police. When the police arrived, Kevin only had time to say that the shooting was an accident before he lost consciousness. He was rushed to the nearest medical center. Fortunately, Kevin survived, but his condition was serious and he would need a long time to recover. Linda's interrogation is ongoing. Police believe Kevin may have wanted to end his life. When Linda was questioned about this, she stated that he had tried to do so before. This situation required further investigation, and it was later revealed that there were more disturbing details involved in the case. During the investigation, it was discovered that a similar tragic shooting had occurred in the family 19 years earlier. Linda reported that Kevin had gone through a troubled adolescence, which had worsened after the death of his father. She informed the police that Kevin had repeatedly threatened to end his life. Even as an adult, Kevin continued to exhibit unstable behavior. Linda recounted an incident just hours before the shooting, at approximately 1 a.m. on June 28, 2011, when Kevin attacked her after an argument. He suddenly turned a corner and struck her in the chest, knocking her to the floor. She showed the police a large bruise as evidence of the attack, saying that Kevin had expressed a desire to kill her. After the fight, Linda went to bed. At the time, only Linda and Kevin were home, as her youngest son was away on a business trip. The conflict with Kevin began because of his relationship with a girl named Karina Taylor. Linda described Kevin as emotionally unstable and Karina as unpredictable, which led to frequent arguments. She said that these conflicts were common and that she was used to them. The next morning, Linda woke up and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. In the living room, she found Kevin lying on the floor with a gunshot wound. He was still alive. However, strangely, Linda said that she did not hear the gunshot. Experienced police sensed deception from the start. It appeared that Linda was trying to conceal what happened that night. She was careful with her words, while the Kevin was unconscious and there were no other witnesses for the police. So they decided to test the only piece of evidence, a .357 Magnum pistol used in the shooting. They knew the gun belonged to Linda. What is even more astonishing is that 10 years ago, Kevin's father, Jim, was shot with this gun in Palm Beach, Florida. Police investigated the case and learned that Linda had been acquitted of murdering her husband, after which Linda tried to reclaim the gun, claiming that she needed it for self-defense. She eventually succeeded in getting it back. The police try to find some similarities between Jim's and Kevin's cases that might support the idea that Linda tried to kill her son. They may even consider re-examining the first crime. Meanwhile, the police talk to family members. Jim's brother, Bob, believes that Linda intentionally shot both cases. He never trusted Linda, but there was nothing he could do to protect his family from harm. Bob was the eldest child in a wealthy and large family. As Jim grew up, he became a successful lawyer and made a good living. The family originally came from Palm Beach, while Linda was from the Midwest, where her parents owned a small family farm in Wisconsin. Jim and Linda met at a party, and after a brief encounter, he fell in love with her beautiful brunette. However, Bob is skeptical about Linda. He finds it strange that she works as a secretary at a law firm and is involved in questionable activities. Jim was deeply in love with her, so he ignored his family's objections and married Linda in 1979. Together, they went on to have 2 sons. Linda had 2 children, Kevin, born in 1981, and Christopher, born later. However, their marriage was not a happy one. Linda accused her husband, Jim, of being abusive. Over time, their relationship deteriorated, leading Linda to report Jim to the police for assault. However, she was unable to produce any evidence or testimony to support her claims. There were no obvious signs of abuse, and many people found it hard to believe that someone as respected and decent as Jim could harm his wife. After facing accusations that damaged his reputation, Jim decided to file for divorce. After the divorce, the children continued to live with Linda in Jim's large house, while Jim had to pay child support. However, Linda was still unhappy and tried to get more money out of Jim. Meanwhile, Jim wanted to spend more time with the children, but if he did not pay her in advance, the children would not be home when he visited. According to Bob, each visit cost Jim $500, a large sum at the time. Jim became increasingly frustrated when he realized that Linda was taking advantage of the situation and blackmailing him. Jim, an attorney, chose to follow the law. On February 7, 1992, he visited his children, not with cash as he had done before, but by court order. The court ruled that Linda had to allow the children to communicate with their father. Unfortunately, during this visit, Linda shot him, resulting in his tragic death. Family members believe that she was angry that he refused to provide financial support because she had previously relied on her ex-husband while not working. In a fit of rage, she shot Jim and then called the police to report the incident. When the police arrived, they found Jim lying on his back in a pool of blood. He was holding a kitchen knife in his right hand, and he had died from multiple gunshot wounds. Linda shot her ex-husband at close range but claimed it was self-defense. She stated that Jim attacked her with a knife, leaving her no option but to shoot him. However, police were doubtful because Linda had no injuries at all. There wasn't a single scratch on her body. This led to questions about whether Jim had actually attacked her and what his motive might have been. In the end, Linda's account was not believed, and she was arrested and charged with first-degree murder. The key witness in the case was her son, Kevin Cooney, who witnessed the murder of his father. He was called in to testify. On that tragic day, younger brother, 8-year-old Christopher, was hiding in a closet and couldn't see the events unfold. Kevin, however, was in the bedroom with the door open to the kitchen, where his parents were arguing. He watched through. He looked through the crack in the door. Kevin remembered feeling terrified and anxious. He was frozen in place, unable to move, when he saw what had happened. But Kevin reported that before the shooting started, he saw his father holding a shiny object, but he couldn't identify it clearly. He thought it looked like a knife, but it might have also been a key or something similar. After the shooting, when he left the room, he noticed his father no longer had anything in his hand. It was only after the shooting ended that a knife appeared in his father's hand. When the police arrived, they suspected Linda had staged a self-defense scenario by placing the knife in Jim's hand. Linda had a strong motive for this action because her husband's sons would inherit his money upon his death. Her children would benefit from Jim Cooney's life insurance policy, worth $1 million, which, along with his considerable estate, would be passed on to his children. However, the most compelling evidence the police uncovered was not Linda's call to the police, but her phone records. They discovered that before calling 911, she had contacted her lawyer first, possibly to seek legal advice. During the 9-to-1 conversation, Linda made several verbal errors, possibly due to confusion. She asked for backup and claimed that her ex-husband was trying to stab her, despite having previously said that she had shot him and that he appeared to be dead. The police were certain that Jim was dead before she called her lawyer, and she only contacted the police afterwards. It is also feared that, before her arrest, Linda had convinced Kevin that the knife had been in his father's possession the entire time. During the trial, Kevin testified that he saw an object in his father's hands. In 1993, 11-year-old Kevin took the stand as a witness. He spoke with a stutter due to fear and held a small toy. Although his testimony was somewhat confusing, it was convincing enough for the jury to quickly acquit Linda Cooney, leading to her release from the courtroom. Clearly, Kevin's testimony played a crucial role in her defense. Afterwards, she gave an interview to numerous media outlets, describing her ex-husband as a typical abuser. She maintained that she was not a murderer but acted in self-defense. To protect herself and her children, some people supported her. However, most Palm Beach residents who knew Linda's family did not believe her explanation. Because of Jim's calm and non-confrontational nature, the locals looked down on her and assumed she was the murderer. As a result, Linda could not stay there long due to the public backlash and the potential for conflict. After receiving financial support, she packed her children and moved to Las Vegas. She wanted to start a new life somewhere where no one would recognize her. 2 decades later, the heartbreaking incident occurred again. It involved the same .357 Magnum pistol that was used to shoot the family's father, Jim. Kevin Cooney is now recovering in the hospital. Initially, he was unconscious and partially paralyzed. He was unable to provide a clear account of the events of that tragic night. When Kevin woke up in the hospital 3 days later, his first words were, "No, Mom, I'm afraid of Mom." Mom shot on. He immediately told several nurses about this and seemed genuinely scared. It was clear he feared that his mother would come back to harm him again. His statements were serious, indicating that he was not joking. Kevin's girlfriend, Karina Taylor, was not surprised by his words. She said she lived in fear of his mother during their 2-year relationship. Their relationship began in 2009. Karina stated that Kevin had a constant fear of his mother, who reacted harshly whenever he had a girlfriend. Linda had previously frightened off all of Kevin's girlfriends, but Karina was determined and not intimidated by Kevin's mother's angry expressions. From their initial interactions, Karina developed a negative view of Linda, finding her to be erratic and aggressive. Linda bluntly tells Karina that Karina's family will never accept her and advises her to stay away from Kevin. And Linda ominously implies that she always carries a gun for self-defense. This makes Karina realize that it is best not to confront Linda, causing her to secretly meet Kevin out of fear for her safety. Kevin's previous girlfriends share similar concerns. 1. Clarita Candle believes Kevin's mother is a serious threat, as Linda has threatened her life. Kevin often finds himself caught in the middle, desperately trying to protect his relationships, which are constantly sabotaged by his mother's behavior. Kevin really wants a future with family and children. But at the age of 30, his mother disapproves of his wishes. One day, his ex-girlfriend Clarita receives an unexpected call from Linda, who has found out her phone number. Linda rudely begins to interrogate Clarita about her life, using vulgar language and accusing her of only being after Kevin's money. This confrontation escalates into a series of unpleasant encounters, where Linda openly insults and threatens Clarita. Although Kevin and Clarita's relationship is short-lived, Clarita constantly feels uncomfortable and believes that Linda is stalking her. Eventually, the stress becomes too much, and she decides to break up with Kevin to find peace. Linda's plan to keep Kevin away from the girls worked for a long time, but it didn't work with Karina Taylor. Kevin and Karina's relationship grew stronger, and he wanted to build a life with her. He decided to leave his mother and move in with Karina, sharing their plans on social media. When Linda found out, she started spreading rumors and even contacted Karina at her work. Kevin wanted to make things right with Linda, and Karina believed he tried to do so the night he was shot. Kevin could not stand his mother's control, so he announced that he was leaving. However, she refused to let him go and used a weapon. She went down from the second floor and shot him in the neck. Police determined that Linda used a .357 caliber gun, the same gun used in Jim's murder. Police discovered that, once again, Linda did not immediately call the police. She waited about 15 minutes before seeking help while Kevin was on the verge of death. Phone records show that she first called her second son, Christopher, who was not nearby. The investigation concluded that Linda was guilty of attempting to murder her son. She was arrested and charged with the crime. On April 8, 2014, Linda went on trial. It had been more than 20 years since she first killed her husband. This time, the trial was held in Las Vegas, where she was charged with attempting to murder Kevin. During the trial, his younger brother Christopher, influenced by his mother, believed that his brother was responsible for the situation. He described Kevin as a very cruel person, often violent at home and often arguing with his mother. During the call, Linda informed Christopher that Kevin had attacked her by hitting her and threatening to kill her. In response, she retrieved a loaded pistol that she kept in the living room for self-defense. She intended to use it to protect herself and stop Kevin, but he took the gun from her. While he was armed, Kevin accidentally shot himself. The defense attempted to present this as an accident, but this was inconsistent with Linda's initial statement, in which she claimed that she did not see who fired the shot, and Kevin also claimed that his mother shot him. During the trial, the prosecution presented testimony from 2 girls, one former girlfriend and one current girlfriend of Kevin, as well as 4 nurses who had contact with him during his hospital stay. All of them confirmed that Linda shot him. In addition to their statements, there was considerable physical evidence, including fingerprints found on the weapon. For months after the shooting that left Kevin paralyzed, he was able to testify in court, but he altered his original story. He now claimed that there had been an argument between them that night, insisting that he attacked Linda first. But Kevin did not hold Linda responsible for the incident, referring to it as self-defense or an accident. He had expressed similar sentiments when speaking to the police at the hospital. It seemed he was worried about not surviving, so he wanted to ensure his mother wouldn't go to prison after he passed away. Kevin loved his mother deeply and continued to protect her, but this did not alter the reality that there had been reports of arguments and domestic violence coming from their home for several years. Kevin's message, originally seen as a warning to his girlfriend about Linda. It was clear that Linda had total control over her children's relationships. She chose not only who they could date, but also who their friends would be. She managed Kevin's mobile phone, preventing him from talking to girls, and did the same with Christopher. The Kevin's and Christopher personal lives were completely controlled. They didn't even have doors on their rooms. Even though they were grown men, they still had to rely on their mother's permission for everything. Since childhood, Linda has said that they owe her their lives for the violent events of 20 years ago. They truly believed that their father intended to harm them, which made them completely submissive to Linda's authority. The trial was ongoing, and its outcome was uncertain. The prosecution argued that Kevin was trying to escape his mother's oppressive control. When Linda realized she was losing control, she grabbed a gun and attempted to kill Kevin. They presented strong evidence, including a video of Kevin in a hospital bed, where he claimed his mother shot him. However, Kevin refuted this claim, stating it stemmed from anger. While in court, Kevin appeared to take full responsibility for the incident. He admitted to threatening his mother, breaking down in tears and begging Linda for forgiveness. The prosecutor accused Linda of being completely controlling and manipulating her sons, but Kevin insisted that he was in charge and made his own decisions. He also admitted to using violence if his mother did not comply. However, this is hard to believe given the testimony of his former girlfriends, who reported that Linda did not allow her sons to pursue personal relationships and maintain tight control over their lives. Medical center staff supported the prosecution's account. They stated that Kevin was extremely agitated and appeared genuinely afraid that his mother was coming to kill him. All 4 nurses who examined him there reported that Kevin admitted that his mother had threatened and tried to kill him. Kevin was then called to testify again. The same events from Linda's first trial 20 years ago were repeated, raising suspicions that Kevin might be able to keep his mother out of jail again. However, this time, Kevin testified that the gun was pointed down when the shot was fired, contradicting his previous testimony to the prosecution. He later testified that the barrel was pointed up when he tried to take the gun away. Everyone noticed these inconsistencies in his testimony. Despite everything, Kevin still hoped that his mother would not go to jail. The prosecutor's office claimed that Kevin was biased because of his feelings for his mother, which they said affected his testimony. The jury returned a verdict in less than an hour. This time, the jury found Linda Cooney, 65, guilty of attempted murder. She was also convicted of assault with a deadly weapon, menacing, and stalking her son. At the final hearing where the verdict was announced, Bob, the brother of Jim, the first victim, spoke up. He stated that Linda had repeatedly harassed and threatened his family, ultimately taking away a loved one from them. He warned that if Linda was released from prison, those close to her would be in danger again. Kevin did not attend the sentencing but submitted a note stating that he took responsibility for these tragic events. In her defense, Linda stated that she had worked hard for years to provide for her children and meet their basic needs. However, she also believed that Kevin had inherited mental health issues from Jim, which contributed to his aggression that night. The court sentenced Linda Cooney to 40 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 13 years. Jim's family was unhappy with the sentence, believing it was unfair. The case of Jacobson family. Neil Jacobson was born in 1961 to Harold Jacobs, a former Marine, and Goldie, a homemaker. He had 2 sisters, Deborah and Robin. Although the parents were strict, they also loved their children very much. Despite the outward calm, but Neil's parents faced some challenges. His mother struggled with lifelong depression, managed with medication and therapy. On the contrary, his father is a calm person and a reliable support for the family, but sometimes he cannot avoid moments of breakdown. Neil also faced mental health issues, likely inherited from his mother, and tried to meet the high standards set by his parents. His sisters, however, seemed unaffected by psychological issues. Neighbors saw family members treating each other with respect and love. Neil's first serious problems began after he was admitted to Montclair State University. He successfully completed his initial years, but each new stage became increasingly difficult. Additionally, he took a job to support himself. He tried his best to manage the workload from both his studies and his job, while also wanting to make his parents proud. However, at times, he couldn't handle it. As a result, just before earning his bachelor's degree, he suffered a breakdown and dropped out of school. Despite facing psychological difficulties and strictness from his parents, he still received support from his father. Yet, it was always very hard for him to accept that he couldn't live up to his parent example. Neil's relationships with women were often complicated and not smooth. However, when he was 29, he met Frankie at the gym. She was 33 at the time. He worked on Long Island, while Frankie worked on Wall Street. Their shared profession as stockbrokers brought them together. They both lived in the same residential complex in Queens, New York. Initially friends, they gradually began dating. Their mutual interests and activities drew them closer. They spent many weekends together over the years. Diving, cycling, and other sports. Their relationship was genuinely happy, as noted by all their friends. On New Year's Eve in 1989, they announced their engagement, and by the end of July 1991, they were married. They decided to start their own business. Neil opened a mortgage brokerage firm in 1993, and a few years later, Frankie left her job to join him in growing the company. Their business prospered, and by 2002, they were able to purchase a luxury home. Not everything went smoothly for them. They always wanted children, but Frankie couldn't get pregnant. She was undergoing infertility treatment for a long time, and finally, a miracle happened. She became pregnant and gave birth to twins, Eric and Joshua, in 2003. The two boys are a great couple and support each other well. Joshua had speech difficulties, but they did everything to support the boy. He attended specialized therapy that their wealth allowed them to afford. During this time, Neil grew tired of the weather in New Jersey, where their mansion was located. In addition, his father Harold's health was deteriorating, and it was difficult for him to visit them because of the distance. To be closer to his father, he decided to move to Florida. He bought 4 properties in the Palm Beach area, 3 condos, and a dream home worth about $1 million. He sees apartments as a good business opportunity to earn rental income. Neil started planning to move, but Frankie was not excited about it. She enjoyed their current home because her family, friends, and business were there, and their children were still young. She did not want to leave, which caused some disagreements between them. However, they managed to work through these difficulties. Neil didn't pressure she to move immediately. Instead, he gave her time to consider it. During a vacation, they visited their dream house, which was still unfurnished, so they slept on air mattresses and gradually got used to the place. Frankie eventually grew fond of it. A few years later, she was ready to move. By July 2007, they relocated to Florida with their children. The children got involved in sports and achieved their first successes. Besides taking care of the children and managing the household, Frankie was also creative and worked on writing a children's book. However, in 2008, their family began to face serious problems. At that time, the real estate market bubble burst, causing a financial crisis that affected many other sectors. The apartments did not generate the income Neil had anticipated, investments did not pay off, previous deals failed, and new purchases were unsuccessful. Consequently, Neil found himself unable to repay the loans he had taken out. Neil, once a successful businessman with over $2 million in capital, is now facing the same amount of debt, and he is struggling to overcome this financial difficulty. During this challenging time, Neil's father passed away, adding more pressure to the family. He had to sell assets for very low prices, yet still faced a substantial debt of $1 million. The ongoing crisis left them with almost no income, and they felt lost about what to do next. They were at risk of losing everything, and this situation seriously affected Neil's health. Then, doctors detected issues with Neil's thyroid gland, although tests only showed a slight hormone imbalance. The doctor chose not to address it immediately, hoping it would improve over time. However, his condition became much worse, particularly affecting his mental health. Shortly after Christmas 2009, he felt unwell, experiencing dizziness and weakness. On January 2, 2010, Frankie took him to the hospital, where doctors diagnosed him with depression and prescribed strong antidepressants, Zoloft and Cias. After a second doctor visit, he was also prescribed the sedative Oxynax, but his condition did not improve, leading him to see a psychiatrist. During his first meeting with the new doctor, Neil reported frequent panic attacks related to the real estate market collapse. Although he had no obvious symptoms that required previously prescribed medications, he did show signs of anxiety. Instead of reducing or changing his medication, the doctor increased the dosage, which led to further deterioration of his condition and the emergence of alarming symptoms. Frankie told her sister, Neela, that Neil experienced periodic hallucinations and had trouble sleeping. He often behaved inappropriately, seemed disoriented, and felt lost. He was convinced that FBI agents were monitoring him because of his debts. He believed that he and Frankie would be imprisoned and that their children would be placed in foster care. All of his relatives knew that he wasn't being watched, but they couldn't convince him otherwise. He was truly paranoid. Neil became withdrawn, staying awake at night waiting for Frankie to wake up, and spent his days following her around, constantly talking about his fears. He couldn't handle the gaze of strangers, so he almost completely stopped going outside, fearing he was being pursued by the FBI. One notable incident that showed Neil's paranoia happened when Frankie managed to get him to go to the gym. She believed that exercise could improve his overall health, including his mental health. However, even before getting on the exercise bike, Neil's heart rate skyrocketed to 200 beats per minute due to his anxiety. This heart rate was dangerously high for his age, so they had to stop the workout to avoid risking his health. Neil's condition was deteriorating, yet he continued taking high doses of medication. About 3 weeks before the incident, he went out alone to enjoy the fresh air. Without waiting for his family, he got into his car and drove off. Luckily, he didn't get far. After driving for a while, he crashed into a barrier at an intersection. Disoriented, he exited the car and began acting inappropriately. A passing driver noticed his odd behavior and called 911 to alert the police. Then, the night January 22, 2010, Neil hid a gun on the top shelf of his bedroom closet. It was a Smith & Wesson revolver, next to an open box of .38 Winchester cartridges and a letter he had opened 3 days earlier. 3 rifles were also concealed in nearby drawers. A birthday party for Neil's twin sons, Joshua and Eric, was planned for January 23rd. Family and friends would gather for the party, play laser tag and take souvenir photos. Unfortunately, the children never arrived at this party as they were soon tragically shot. Around 6 a.m. on January 23, 2010, while everyone was still asleep, a tragedy unfolded, just hours before the party. Neil woke up, retrieved a gun from the closet, and his wife Frankie heard the noise. Frankie was half awake, not understanding what was happening in the next room, so she called her husband, Neil, and asked him what he was doing. Neil emerged from the dressing room holding a gun and pointed it at Frankie's, 53 years old. He told her that it was over and there was no other way. Terrified, she pleaded with him not to do it, insisting that she wanted to live and asked about their children. Neil persistently told her that there was no other solution and that they all needed to go to another world. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Realizing he was serious, she rushed at him, in an attempt to take the gun from him to protect herself and their children. A life and death struggle broke out between them, and they fell to the floor. Frankie fought with all her strength to take the gun and save herself and the children, but her efforts were in vain. Neil was stronger. He managed to wrest the gun from her grasp and shot her twice in the face, killing she instantly. During the struggle, she suffered several injuries, including a knocked-out front tooth and cuts on her fingers. Then, Neil reloaded the gun, put more bullets in his pocket, and went to the children's room at the other end of the house. First, Neil went to Eric's room, where his son was still sleeping soundly and didn't hear the gunshots. Neil, without hesitation, raised the gun and aimed it at his son's head. He shot Eric twice in the face, causing blood to splatter up to the ceiling and cover the surrounding walls. Although Eric did not die immediately, but the boy began to moan and choke on his own blood. Neil then pressed a pillow to his son's face and fired 2 more shots. At this time, the boy showed no signs of life, and Neil concluded it was over. He reloaded the weapon and went to Joshua's room. Like Eric, Joshua was still fast asleep and did not hear a thing. Neil placed a pillow on Joshua's right cheek and shot him twice in the face. The boy didn't react. Neil checked to ensure the boy was dead, then he leaving the room. He returned to the bedroom, past Frankie's body, and went into the bathroom to wash the blood off his face and hands. Afterward, he took his car keys and attempted to rouse his deceased family members, telling each of them to come on quickly and adding that if they didn't get up, he would have to leave without them. Of course, none of them responded. The ambulance arrived at the scene. Neil was covered in blood, but only suffered minor injuries from the accident that occurred earlier. The officers attempted to speak with he. During a brief and unclear conversation, he repeatedly tried to find his gun and acted suspiciously. The police confiscated the gun and continued questioning him. During the conversation, he confessed to killing his family. He was detained until the incident could be clarified. The detectives quickly began their investigation. They went to the Jacobson family home in Wellington, Florida, near Palm Beach, to verify his statement, where they discovered a horrific scene, 3 bodies inside the house. The crime scene was undisturbed, with bodies in various locations throughout the home. There was a lot of blood, and all 3 family members were dead. Forensic experts started examining the house, while detectives interrogated Neil at the local police station, allowing them to piece together the incident of that terrible morning. During his conversations with detectives, Neil frequently referred to his suicide note. In this 5-page typewritten letter, he detailed the reasons for his planned murder and end his life. He wrote that he could no longer live like this. Everything in their lives was spiraling out of control. He felt it was necessary to kill his entire family and himself to prevent them from suffering due to his poor business decisions. The letter also revealed that he intended to visit his mother and kill her. This was confirmed when police searched his car and found the keys to his mother's house, which he had brought with him. He was heading towards her house when the accident occurred. The police thought Neil didn't mean to end his life. Instead, he lost control after taking medication and crashed. However, his mother disagreed, she believing he wasn't a threat. She blamed the bloody incident on January 23rd on incorrect prescriptions from doctors, saying the medication was too strong and caused Neil to lose control of his actions. During questioning, Neil said on January 23, 2010, while his family was celebrating their children's birthdays, a special force arrested him. However, the 2 children Joshua and Eric did not survive to see their birthday party. This horrific case has shocked the entire town of Wellington. Many people close to the family and neighbors could not believe that Neil, a respected businessman, could do such a thing to his family. The defense argued that the murder was committed due to insanity, so Neil was sent for a psychiatric evaluation. While in prison, he met with psychiatrists multiple times. His mental state was very unstable. Sometimes he showed no emotions and seemed detached from reality, while other times he lost control and became hysterical, especially when he remembered his actions. In prison, doctors diagnosed him with deep depression and prescribed different medications. Initially, he seemed to improve, and his condition stabilized. However, after a few weeks, the psychiatrist stopped the treatment because his body reacted poorly to the medication. However, a subsequent examination revealed that, due to a medical error, Neil did not receive treatment for his main illness, hypothyroidism, related to the thyroid gland and hormonal balance. In this context, apathy, depression, and anxiety are very likely. It was determined that he was prescribed powerful psychotropic drugs without official justification, not even a complete psychiatric examination was conducted. Furthermore, it was found that the doses of the prescribed medications he took could indeed cause the hallucinations and disorders that he experienced. Neil deeply loved his family. He and his wife were not only married, but also best friends. He never did anything wrong with his wife and children and was devoted to them. However, he was severely impacted by the financial crisis, leg problems, and his father's death, and his treatment was ineffective. Neil claimed that he wasn't the one who harmed his family. During the 3 weeks he was on medication, he changed significantly, sleeping only 2 hours a day. One day, the medication had a severe effect on Neil's, making his brain feel like it was burning. That morning, he woke up hearing voices in his head commanding him. Initially, he resisted, but the voices became louder and more persistent. He genuinely believed that killing his entire family was the only way to protect them from the FBI. Prosecutors are asking for the sentence of death under Florida law. However, many of Neil's relatives, including his lawyer, opposed such a severe punishment. They supported Neil, noting that before the tragic incident, he had never been cruel. Although he appeared worried and stressed about financial matters, but his family did not believe he was capable of such a violent act. The defense argued that a medical error led to the wrong treatment, and they demanded that the doctors be held accountable for the tragedy. The Palm Beach prosecutor mentioned that 2 copies of a suicide note had been discovered in the Jacobson family home. The note expressed love for the family and expressed feeling overwhelmed by their current circumstances. It stated that due to his short-sightedness, he had placed the family in a position of losing everything they had built. He admitted to participating in the real estate investment craze and felt confused about his actions. The note conveyed his desire not to leave his family in poverty and his inability to let them live in such conditions. He admitted that anxiety was consuming him and expressed shame. The first note was dated January 20th, and the second January 23rd, the same day as the triple homicide. This is considered evidence to classify the murder as premeditated, showing that he had planned his actions. Despite acting impulsively, but he admitted to having brought weapons home in advance and hiding them in the dressing room. Frankie was unaware of the presence of a pistol in the house and had no knowledge of the tragic incident that were to occur that morning. Neil had a clear memory of all the incident and was able to describe them in detail. A few days before the incident, Neil's mother visited him. During her visit, Neil repeatedly hugged her and said her that he loved her no matter what happened. This behavior raised doubts about his mental state. Despite this, the Frankie family viewed Neil as a coward and cruel man for allowing evil to take control and lead to the death of his entire family. The defense argued that Neil's inappropriate behavior, such as waking up and immediately rushing to the weapon closet, suggested a mental disorder. They claimed he was influenced by voices and experienced a breakdown due to medication. Friends and relatives confirmed these claims. Subsequently, an independent psychiatric examination diagnosed Neil with bipolar disorder type 2 and several other serious mental issues. These findings led to him being deemed insane at the time of the crime. Nonetheless, the lawyers believed the jury would not accept this insanity defense and advised Neil to negotiate a plea deal with the prosecution. To avoid the death penalty, Neil agreed to a deal. Consequently, in February 2012, he pleaded guilty to murdering 3 people. His death penalty was replaced with 3 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Initially, he was under special supervision by prison guards, which is common in cases with a high risk of end his life. Neil attempted to end his life 3 times, feeling he had nothing left to live for, but each time he was saved. As part of the plea bargain, his relatives are allowed to visit him twice a year. In prison, he works as a clerk in the library, helping prisoners choose books and find information. Fellow prisoners say that Neil cries every day in his cell when he is alone, regretting his actions. Before the verdict, he often stated that he was indifferent to the death penalty and even expected it as a form of release. For someone who was once a loving husband and father, living with this overwhelming guilt is unbearable. This year, his wife Frankie would have turned 78, and their children Eric and Joshua would have been 32. Instead, they will forever remain 53 and 7, buried together in one grave. The case of Amy Fisher. Amy Fisher was born on August 21, 1974, in New York, USA. She is the only child in her family. Amy has a rather shy and modest personality. Amy often feels lonely. Although her parents provided her with everything she wanted, because they worked long hours and had little time for her. Therefore, she formed a close relationship with her grandmother and aunt. Her father was strict and harsh, often punishing both his wife and daughter for any mistakes, which made Amy afraid of him. There were many arguments between her parents, and each time, Amy hoped they would lead to divorce. However, her father was a skillful manipulator who controlled her mother, making her too afraid to leave the marriage. At a young age, Amy suffered a traumatic experience when she was raped by a family friend when she was just 6 years old. She kept this abuse a secret. When she was 13, Amy was raped again, this time by a worker hired to fix her family's house. And once again, she chose not to speak about it. These experiences left her with deep psychological scars. Despite this trauma, Amy tried to lead a normal teenage life. She had a close group of friends and a beloved dog that she spent time with every day. During this time, she dreamed of going to college to become a fashion designer. In February 1991, after an argument over the phone with her mother about spending the night at a friend's house, Amy ran away from home. During the argument, her father took the phone and warned her that if she came home late, he would punish her. This caused Amy to not return home, and she spent several days sleeping at various friends' houses and at her aunt and grandmother's. She was afraid to return because of her father's threats. Meanwhile, her father reported her missing to the police, saying that she was unstable and uncontrollable. That same year, the girl discovered she was pregnant, which shocked both her and her boyfriend. Fortunately, her aunt helped her arrange an abortion without her parents finding out. In May, when she left the garage, she accidentally broke the side mirror of her car. She feared that her father would punish her for this incident. She had previously taken her car to a repair shop to fix a similar problem, where a skilled mechanic quickly fixed the car without her father noticing. This time, she returned to the shop alone and met a man named Joey Buttafoco. This meeting was the fate of her life. Joey was married to Mary Jo, the oldest of 5 sisters from a Catholic family in a Long Island suburb. They met in 1971 while both were in high school and taking summer courses. Joey was charming and funny, but he had lost his mother when he was 11, which left him deeply affected during his teenage years. Mary provided him with support during this difficult time. Their relationship developed quickly, and they married in 1977, purchasing a house next to his family's auto repair shop. Mary's lifestyle changed dramatically when she became pregnant. Mary began to accept a more responsible adult life. And she noticed that Joey had not changed. While she was at home, Joey continued to go to parties as usual. Mary did not confront him about this, hoping that he would eventually change. However, this situation made her frustrated because of Joey's needs and desires. He became addicted to drugs, went to work early and came home late, sometimes disappearing for days. Each time he returned, he had a convincing excuse, because he was very good at lying. Mary endured this situation for a long time, rarely seeing her husband, and her patience was exhausted. She began to talk about divorce more often, but Joey always tried to ease her worries. And then she went on to get pregnant again. After giving birth to her daughter Jessica, she tried her best to maintain the appearance of an ideal family. Meanwhile, Joey continued his reckless behavior. This made Mary feel sad and made her see herself as a failure. As a result, she began to experience frequent panic attacks. Mary began seeing a therapist who helped her control her anxiety. However, this did not solve the problem of her uncontrollable husband. Faced with this reality, Mary had no choice but to take prescription medication, raise her child, and hope for a future where Joey would change. Mary gradually realized that they needed to move back to their old neighborhood on Long Island, as Joey's parties and friends were having a negative effect on him. She convinced Joey that they needed to move. The couple planned to buy a new house. Much to Mary's surprise, her husband quickly found a cash buyer for their current home, making it seem like a great opportunity. They could move immediately, and Mary expected to receive the money to buy a new house. However, on the day they were due to leave, Joey admitted to a serious problem. He revealed that he had mortgaged their property and given all the money to his drug dealer. It turned out that he was heavily in debt due to his drug use and had to mortgage the house just to pay off the debt. This news was quite distressing. A family with 2 children found themselves homeless and broke. Fortunately, Joey's father stepped in to help by giving them the money they needed for a down payment on a new home in Massapequa, a suburb of Long Island. However, he had his own motives. He believed Joey was incapable of managing a business and feared he would lose the auto repair shop. As a result, Joey received the money, but he also lost his claim to the family business and became just an employee in his father's shop. Despite this, Mary remained supportive and forgave her husband. She enrolled him in a rehabilitation program, which ultimately helped him. In the end, they were able to find happiness together. The Mary never expected that another woman would enter their lives. In May 1991, Amy Fisher returned to the auto repair shop to fix her car, just like she had done the previous year. She was worried about her father finding out because she didn't have any money, so she needed to come up with a story. Joey agreed to help her with this. Joey agreed to help her with this. They decided he would say she brought the car in for routine maintenance, and that while she was there, someone had hit her car at night and broken the mirror. The plan worked. Amy's father believed the story, and Amy felt grateful to Joey for helping her avoid trouble with her dad. From that point on, Amy frequently brought her car to the shop for minor repairs, which she pretended were her fault, just to see Joey more often. Amy was much younger than Joey, with an age gap of almost 20 years. However, she often flirted with Joey. On July 2nd, she went to the auto repair shop again to install a sound system. Because her father could not take her home after leaving the car there for several hours. Then Joey offered to drive Amy home himself, and she agreed. When they arrived at her house, he asked if she could show him around, and she agreed. They had sex for the first time at her parents' house. After that experience, the girl began to consider Joey her boyfriend. They met again that night. Even though she was only 16 and he was 35, they began their relationship. Amy and Joey's relationship continued over the next few years. Amy would frequently visit Joey's auto repair shop, and they would meet at a motel and at her house. Joey seemed to be taking advantage of Amy's weaknesses. He knew about her troubled relationship with her father and realized how vulnerable she was. He began buying her expensive gifts and taking her out to dinner and on his boat. Amy was very fond of Joey, and their age difference did not bother her. Amy finally turned 17 on August 21st, 1991. A month after her birthday, she approached Joey for financial help. By that time, Joey had lost his management position at the shop and could not give her the money she needed. Joey then suggested that she could make money by selling her body, and she agreed to become a call girl. Over time, Amy met other men, but her relationship with Joey continued. Their relationship was unhealthy, and it was clear that it would not end well. Just before the tragic events, Joey pressured her to cut ties with her aunt, one of the few supportive family members. Amy agreed and ended up without any support from her family. Before the tragic event, Amy urged Joey to leave his wife. However, Joey refused. Despite his relationship with Amy, Joey still loved Mary deeply and had no intention of leaving family. This revelation came as a significant shock to Amy. At the time, she decided to end all contact with him, but she struggled with her feelings and ultimately chose to stay in his life. During this time, Joey frequently expressed that his marriage was deteriorating. He mentioned having deep feelings for Amy and even mentioned wanting Mary dead. According to him, he had caught Mary cheating on him multiple times, and he described her behavior as unbearable, saying that she had tormented him throughout their marriage. Joey often made excuses for why he couldn't file for divorce, with the couple's children being the main reason. Amy believed him and felt sympathy for his situation. Over time, these lies began to influence Amy's thoughts, leading her to devise a murder plan. She intended for Mary to be shot, believing this would allow Joey to be free of his wife. Initially, Amy attempted to hire two of her classmates to carry out the murder, offering them $400 in sexual favors in return. However, her classmates eventually refused, causing her plan to fail. The situation changed dramatically when Amy started going to the gym and met the gym owner, Paul Meckley, a 30-year-old man. They began a romantic relationship. In addition, Amy regularly met 3 clients, providing them with intimate services. At this point, she decided to stop using the company's services and started seeing clients directly. She openly shared details of her life with Paul. Since he knew Joey well, Paul tried to convince Amy to end her relationship with Joey, who was married. When Joey finds out that Amy is dating someone else, he becomes anxious for fear of losing her. He tries to interfere with her new relationship, but all his efforts are unsuccessful. Meanwhile, Paul and Amy decide to get revenge on Joey. Their plan is to inform his wife, Mary, about Joey's affair. To carry out their plan, they hire a 21-year-old named Peter Guargenti to drive Amy to Mary's house. They steal the license plate from a random car in town to use on Peter's car. On May 19, 1992, Amy went to school but did not intend to attend classes. Instead, she went straight to the nurse, saying she felt unwell, and was sent home. Peter was waiting for her in his car at the entrance. They switched the license plates and drove to the Mary family's house. At 11:30, Amy knocked on the door. At that moment, Mary was inside the house drawing by herself. When Mary opened the door, Amy asked her to step out onto the porch for an important conversation. Amy introduced herself using a fake name and told a story about Joey being in a relationship with her sister. However, Mary did not believe her. She thought her husband had stopped partying and had become a devoted family man. The Amy guest became very anxious. The Amy guest became very anxious. The Amy guest became very anxious. She felt frustrated by Mary's lack of trust. To prove her connection, she revealed a T-shirt with the logo of the auto repair shop where Joey worked. However, Mary still did not believe and rejected Amy's story. This led to a heated argument that lasted 15 minutes. The Amy tried every possible way to persuade the Mary that her husband was having an affair. Amy concealed important details such as her actual age, where she lived, and her relationship with the Joey, twisting the truth to fit her story. As a result, Amy's lies seemed even less credible. Eventually, the Mary turned away and headed for the door, asking the Amy to leave. It was clear that she viewed the girl's claims as fabrications and had no intention of listening further. In a fit of rage, Amy hit Mary in the head and accidentally shot her. The recoil of the gun knocked Amy to the ground, and Mary landed on top of Amy. She then pushed Mary away, quickly got up, and got into Peter's car. She later told Peter that the gun had gone off accidentally, claiming that she had only meant to scare Mary. After fleeing the scene, they dumped the gun and Mary's bloody clothes in a sewer near her house. She returned home and pretended that nothing had happened. A passerby heard a loud bang but did not see Amy. He found Mary lying unconscious in a pool of blood on the porch. He quickly ran to a neighbor's house for help and called an ambulance. Doctors arrived in time and discovered that the bullet had hit a vital artery and shattered her jaw. Mary had lost a significant amount of blood and was in critical condition. Thanks to the passerby's quick actions, she had a chance of survival. Doctors assessed her condition and thought she had a good chance of recovery and rushed her to the hospital. The bullet was lodged near her spine, making it impossible to remove. Mary was placed on life support overnight while undergoing surgery. Fortunately, she regained consciousness a few days later and was able to provide the police with a description of her attacker. Mary repeated Amy's story, but Amy had given a false address and name, rendering the information futile. However, there was one clue, a T-shirt with the logo of Joey's auto repair shop. The police approached Joey for information. He explained that he had distributed a large number of the T-shirts for promotional purposes. He also gave the police a photo of Amy, his mistress. Joey suspected her of being involved, which helped the police identify the attacker. On May 21st, Amy was arrested on the street near her home. She was then subjected to a 12-hour interrogation without her parents or an attorney present, a violation of the legal protections afforded to minors. Her parents had no idea what had happened. When they returned home that evening, they assumed Amy had simply run away again, so they were not concerned when she did not return home that night. The police did not inform them that their daughter had been arrested for attempted murder. When details of the case became public, journalists quickly became interested in Amy, a girl with a troubled life and crime. They reported that she had sold her body and had attacked a respectable married woman with a gun. This caused public outrage and reporters searched for any information they could find. A video emerged showing Amy with another client. Weeks after her arrest, Amy had not confessed to any of the crimes. She was held on $2 million bail. Her story attracted a lot of attention. Amy to post bail and spend time at home while awaiting trial. However, the media attention severely harmed her reputation. Amy claimed that the illegal activities she was involved in were a result of Joey's influence, as he pressured her into selling her body at a young age. This became the central argument that her lawyers used in their defense strategy. Joey denied having an affair with Amy, but evidence emerged in the form of 13 receipts from a motel where he met Amy, confirming their secret involvement. Several motel employees confirmed frequent visits. During the court proceedings, Amy spoke against him, providing evidence linking his handwriting to the relationship. However, Joey maintained that the accusations were fabricated. Even Mary sided with him, refuting Amy's. While waiting for her trial, Amy focused on preparing for it. She spent all her money on bail, leaving her unable to pay her lawyer, who agreed to defend her for free. There were rumors that she was having an affair with her lawyer, who seemed to have feelings for her and even sent her gifts. On the advice of her attorney, she accepted a plea deal with the prosecution. With the weapon and motive, it would be difficult to argue that the gun went off accidentally. On September 23, 1992, after turning 18, she confessed to the accidental killing. Amy stated that she was angry with Mary because she refused to listen. When Mary turned away, Amy hit her in the head twice with the gun. After the second strike, the gun accidentally went off, injuring Mary. Amy maintained that she did not intend to kill Mary. It was an accident that she deeply regretted. Journalists discovered that Amy was involved in a romantic relationship with the gym's owner, Paul. He sought to capitalize on the situation by attracting media attention. Paul even installed a hidden camera in his gym to secretly film a personal conversation with Amy. Paul admitted he enjoyed the media attention and was eager to appear in news stories, as they paid well. With the money from this exposure, Paul planned to buy a Ferrari. Once Amy realized that even Paul was exploiting her, she attempted to take her own life again. Subsequently, she was required to undergo treatment in a psychiatric clinic, where she stayed for several months. On December 2nd, Amy appeared in court. Mary felt the plea deal was unfair because it allowed Amy to be released after only 2 years and 9 months, a punishment that seemed inadequate given the severity of the crime. Mary, who survived the attack, suffered partial facial paralysis and hearing loss in her right ear due to the bullet lodged in her spine. The injury left her in constant pain and with vision problems. Doctors warned that if the bullet had moved, she could have been completely paralyzed or even killed. When Amy was given the opportunity to speak, she apologized and blamed Joey for everything. She claimed that he knew about her plan to shoot his wife from the beginning and even encouraged her. Although Amy wants to bring Joey to justice, there is no evidence linking him to the crime. Amy later admitted that she intended to kill Mary. Several witnesses confirmed that Amy had mentioned wanting to kill Mary. The investigation found that the gun was functioning properly and could not have been fired randomly, given the trajectory and force of the bullet. In addition, it was suspected that Amy and her accomplice Peter had taken steps to prepare for this trip, such as changing the license plate and purchasing weapons. This suggested that they were planning a targeted attack. During the trial, Amy's hopes of serving only 2 years and 9 months in prison were dashed. Instead, she pleaded guilty to first-degree assault with aggravated circumstances and received a 15-year sentence. Peter Guagenti, who drove her to Mary's house, was arrested and charged with being an accessory to the crime and was sentenced to 6 months in prison. Joey appeared on several television shows with his wife to prove his innocence. They even went on a small press tour and appeared on various channels across the country. During this time, the prosecutor's office began to receive many calls from people who believed that Joey should also face legal consequences because they thought he was indirectly involved in the incident. The police could no longer ignore the accusations against Joey. The following April, Joey Buttafogo was arrested and charged with sex with a minor. Joey reached a plea deal with the prosecutor and admitted his guilt. As a result, he served only 6 months in prison and paid a $5,000 fine. He claimed he had been wrongly convicted, portraying himself as the victim of a deceitful schoolgirl. After pleading guilty, he ended up serving only 4 months in prison before being released. In 1995, Joey was arrested again in Los Angeles for soliciting prostitution. He claimed he was innocent and that the incident was staged. As a result, he served the last 75 days of his sentence. During this time, Mary fell into a severe depression and took medication to cope with the pain. After the family moved to Los Angeles, she became an alcoholic but later went to rehab, which improved her life. Amy's time in prison was difficult. She complained that she was raped by prison guards multiple times. Amy wanted to be transferred to another facility, but the prison authorities refused. In 1999, after serving 7 years in prison, Amy was granted early parole. During a meeting with the parole board, she tearfully confessed that the attack on her lover's wife was entirely her idea. Realizing her wrongdoing led to her release. Meanwhile, Mary discovered that her husband had been cheating on her multiple times. Unable to bear her husband's constant infidelity, she filed for divorce in 2003 after 26 years of marriage. At the same time, Joey was arrested for attempted insurance fraud involving his car. He never learned from his mistakes. He remarried and continued to live an eccentric lifestyle. After the divorce, Mary had facial surgery that allowed her to smile normally and partially regain her hearing. During this time, her children were very supportive. In 2009, she published a book about her life story. For years, she harbored resentment toward Amy for shooting her. However, during her rehabilitation, Mary realized that it was time to let go of the past and stop punishing herself. This realization led her to forgive Amy. In 2010, Mary remarried and moved to California, where she became a grandmother and enjoyed a peaceful life. After her release from prison, Amy moved to Florida and wrote 2 books about her life. She sought fame and money, even creating a false identity. Amy began working as a webcam model and adult film actress, frequently appearing on talk shows to share her experiences. After marrying a former New York police officer and having 3 children, her marriage ended in divorce in 2015. Their eldest son stayed with his father, while Amy returned to Long Island with her 2 younger children and lived with her mother for a time. During this time, she worked as a stripper in a strip club but eventually quit. She continued to work as a webcam model. Her ex-husband did not support this lifestyle. He suggested that Amy buy a smaller house, preferably in a remote area where she could remain anonymous and find a regular job and live more modestly. However, she refused his offer. The case of Melinda Pliskovic. Melinda Pliskovic was born on January 5, 1968, in Strongsville, Ohio, a city near Cleveland with a population of about 45,000. As this city is always quiet, calm, and safe, residents often left their doors unlocked. At 24, Melinda married Bruce, and together they had 3 children, 2 daughters, Megan and Anna, and the younger son, Kyle, who has Down syndrome. The children give meaning to her life, and she devoted a lot of time to Kyle, striving to give the boy a fulfilling and happy life. The family lived in a spacious, cozy 2-story house and a large basement. Melinda worked as a math teacher and also coached the school football team. She leading an active and fulfilling life, while Bruce worked as an accountant. In 2015, their 19-year-old daughter Megan moved to another city to attend college. The eldest daughter, Anna, who was 20, had been engaged to her high school boyfriend, Jeffrey Scullin, also 20. Anna worked as a waitress, while Jeffrey was a technician who serviced heating systems. As they were planning their wedding, Anna discovered she was pregnant, which brought joy to the whole family. Anna's parents suggested that Jeffrey move in with them because the couple couldn't afford their own place. Anna and Jeffrey happily agreed because they needed both material and emotional support, along with help in taking care of the baby. Jeffrey moved in with Anna's family in June 2016, just before their daughter was born. The baby was born on July 3rd and was named Aurora. Everything went well. Melinda helped Anna take care of Aurora, helping the young couple save money for their wedding and buying a house. At that time, the household consisted of 6 people: Melinda, Bruce, Kyle, Anna, Jeffrey, and baby Aurora. Shortly after that, something unusual occurred. Melinda, Bruce, and Kyle went to visit relatives, leaving Anna and Jeffrey home with Aurora. In the evening, they noticed 4 people in their backyard, talking, smoking, and watching the house. This was alarming, as nothing like this had happened before. Jeffrey, feeling scared, called the police, but by the time they arrived, the strangers had already left. The officer checked the yard but found nothing suspicious and noted that there were no cameras around the house. The police left, advising them to call again if the strangers returned. In the days following the incident, Anna and Jeffrey were very cautious, frequently looking out the windows and ensuring no one was around. However, no one else came, and eventually, they forgot about the incident. In November 2016, Anna was home with Aurora, and she heard someone trying to open the back door. She thought it was Jeffrey or her parents had returned and forgotten the key. She picked up her daughter and went to the back door. As she approached the large glass sliding doors, she saw the figure of an unfamiliar man. It was clear he was neither her father nor Jeffrey. Terrified, she froze, unsure of what to do next. The man noticed Anna through the glass, looked at her, and then left. Panicking, she grabbed her phone, ran upstairs to her room, locked the door, and called the police. When the police arrived, the man was gone. The officer searched the area but found no signs of him. Anna couldn't describe the man because it was dark and she could only see his silhouette. In January 2017, Anna went back to work full-time at the restaurant. Around the same time, a troubling incident occurred, involving some strangers. Someone broke into Bruce's car and stole a laptop. The family believes that the strangers were following them, and this time, the strangers left no trace. A few months later, Anna, Jeffrey, and Aurora were home one evening, preparing for bed. She looked out the window and noticed 3 strangers standing in their backyard, watching them. She became very frightened and started to panic. She called the police, while Jeffrey, seeing the strangers, felt he needed to confront them. He grabbed a flashlight and went outside. When the strangers saw him, they ran away. The police arrived shortly after but found nothing. Shortly after this incident, another incident occurred. One evening, Anna was at home with Aurora, while Melinda was upstairs. Suddenly, she heard a noise at the back door. Someone was trying to open it again. She quietly approached the door to see who it was. This time, she saw 2 men dressed in dark clothing and hooded jackets, which obscured their faces. Unable to see them clearly, so she decided to scare them off. She screamed loudly, and it worked. The men were startled and ran away. Melinda, hearing her scream, rushed downstairs in a panic, shouting that the strangers had returned. Then, she called the police, who came to inspect the house and surrounding area, but found nothing suspicious. The entire family lived in fear, confused about why they were being watched and what the strangers wanted. Everyone was worried that they might be attacked. In September 2017, Melinda realized that her car's spare key was missing. It had always been kept in the same spot, and she was certain she hadn't misplaced it. The family feared that strangers had broken into their house and taken the keys. As time went on, they learned the reason behind the theft. The car's alarm frequently went off at night, and someone started the car and drove away. Bruce also discovered that nails had been placed in the tires of his car. Additionally, the family noticed that money was disappearing from their home. They called the police 3 times, but each time, the officers were unable to find any fingerprints or evidence of a break-in, as the intruders left no traces. In October 2017, another unsettling incident occurred. Melinda and Jeffrey were at home with Aurora when they heard someone trying to open the front door. Jeffrey walked the dog to the door to see what was going on. He saw a large man in dark clothing with his face covered standing outside. The dog barked, which frightened the intruder, causing him to flee. Melinda called the police again, but they found nothing. On October 23, 2017, Jeffrey, Aurora, and Bruce went to the restaurant where Anna worked and they had dinner together. Melinda and Kyle stayed home, and something terrible happened that night. After dinner, Jeffrey, along with Aurora and Bruce, headed home in separate cars. Melinda's car was parked outside, the front door was closed, and the dog was outside. Bruce knocked on the house door, but nobody answered. He knocked again, and his son Kyle eventually opened the door. Kyle is depressed and doesn't say anything, so he can't tell Bruce what happened. Bruce felt something was wrong with Melinda. As he entered the kitchen and discovered she lying face down on the floor, covered in blood. Jeffrey held Aurora as he entered the kitchen. When he saw Melinda with gunshot wounds to her head, Bruce screamed in shock, took Aurora from Jeffrey, and urged his son Kyle to come outside with him. Jeffrey quickly rushed into the street and called 911, telling them they had just come from a restaurant and found Melinda's body in the kitchen. Later, Bruce also called 911, he feeling frustrated that the police had not responded to their previous reports about strangers watching them and trying to break into their home, and now Melinda was dead. The police and ambulance quickly arrived at the scene, they finding 49-year-old Melinda deceased. They began a thorough investigation of the house and surrounding area, then, they found a clue. In Jeffrey's car, they found a gun and a bloody knife, concealed under his clothes in the back seat. He couldn't explain where they came from, so both the knife and the gun were sent for analysis. Additionally, blood was discovered on the car door and on his sweatpants. Immediately after that, Jeffrey was taken in for questioning. He stated that he had spoken to Melinda the day before her death, when she expressed a desire to go to a restaurant with him and take Kyle along. She even asked Jeffrey to contact his mother to arrange a meeting. However, then due to a leg injury, so she changed her mind and decided to stay home with Kyle. The following afternoon, he visited Melinda. She had just returned from a doctor's appointment and seemed fine. He then went to his aunt's house, and later that evening, Melinda was found dead. When the police contacted his aunt, she denied having seen him that day. During questioning, Bruce, Melinda's husband, mentioned that in the afternoon, she sent him an unusual message, saying to meet at 4:30 in a beer restaurant. He found it odd because they typically discussed their plans over the phone beforehand. Before, she had never communicated to him in that manner, but at the time, he didn't think much of it. He just replied that he agreed, and then he went to the restaurant. Now, he realizes that the message had been written by someone else. Bruce arrived at the beer restaurant but didn't find Melinda there. After having a drink, he decided to go to the gym for a workout. While he was there, Jeffrey called to remind him about a meeting at the restaurant where Anna worked. Anna also called and asked if he would come. Bruce got to the restaurant after 7 p.m. By then, Jeffrey was already eating and drinking beer, but Melinda was still missing. Bruce asked Jeffrey where Melinda and Kyle were, but Jeffrey said they had no idea. Melinda's phone was off, which was unusual. They quickly finished their meal and prepared to go home. However, Jeffrey asked to stop at a gas station first and requested that Bruce accompany him to keep an eye on the baby, Aurora. They returned home and discovered Melinda's body. Investigators believe that Jeffrey killed Melinda before going to the restaurant and arranged the meeting there to create an alibi for himself. The autopsy revealed that Melinda had suffered 35 stab wounds to her back and 3 gunshot wounds to her head. Jeffrey and Anna were engaged and living with Anna's parents. Her parents have supported them in everything and are planning to buy a house for them, with the money have saved. Although Jeffrey and Melinda occasionally had arguments, which is common in relationships between a son-in-law and wife's mother, but they didn't have any serious arguments. So what could Jeffrey's motives be? He was facing financial difficulties. He had quit his job and was only working part-time. With the wedding scheduled for October 28, 2017, just 5 days away, he didn't have enough money to pay for it. His credit card was locked, so he couldn't make any payments. Melinda was in charge of organizing the wedding and was responsible for paying the restaurant and other expenses. This situation could have led to an argument between them. He may be worried that she will tell Anna about his financial problems, causing the wedding to go off. Or maybe she found out something else about him. Jeffrey's acquaintances mentioned that he always hated Melinda. It also seemed odd that Jeffrey didn't introduce his parents to her family. Although they wanted to arrange a meeting, but he kept scheduling and then canceling it, claiming his parents were unavailable. However, when researchers interviewed Jeffrey's parents, they revealed they had no knowledge of these meetings, as Jeffrey never invited them. Despite all this, Melinda's relatives still do not believe he is guilty. They were convinced that the murder was committed by some strangers who had been observing the house. Strangely enough, these strangers began observing the house after Jeffrey had moved in. It is also worth noting that no other homes were followed by these strangers and the police never identified them. DNA tests confirmed that the blood on the knife and door belonged to Melinda, and Jeffrey's DNA was found on the knife handle. Forensic examination of the gun showed that the gun found in Jeffrey's car was involved in her shooting. Subsequently, Jeffrey was arrested and charged with Melinda's murder. He failed a lie detector test and later confessed to the crime during further questioning. He said that when he arrived at the house, Melinda was furious. She pointed a gun at him, screamed, and threatened him. He grabbed the gun from her and shot her 3 times, claiming he didn't remember stabbing her 35 more times. People wonder why Jeffrey continues to attack Melinda, even though there is no longer any threat to his life. No one believed his story. After Jeffrey's arrest, the strangers watching their house suddenly disappeared and everything stopped. Investigators believe that all of the incidents involving strangers were planned by Jeffrey. They may have been his friends or he hired someone to intimidate Melinda's family for a year and a half. It seemed like Jeffrey was trying to mislead the police and derail the investigation. It was also odd that Melinda's family, despite being wealthy, did they not install CCTV cameras. It turned out Jeffrey opposed these security measures, including tracking apps, possibly fearing exposure. Everything pointed back to Jeffrey. He arranged the dinner at the restaurant, delayed leaving, and then took Bruce to the gas station. Strangers began watching the house after Jeffrey moved in and vanished after his arrest. Melinda's funeral was held on October 28, 2017, which was supposed to be the wedding day for Anna and Jeffrey, but the wedding did not happen. At the funeral, relatives, friends, neighbors, students, and colleagues remembered Melinda as a caring wife, a loving grandmother, and a beloved teacher who dedicated 27 years of service to the school. She was also a coach and mentor. Jeffrey attended the funeral alone with other relatives. Kyle, who witnessed his mother's murder, never accepted that she was gone and continues to wait for her return. In addition to the murder charge, Jeffrey was also charged with assault, falsifying evidence, giving false testimony, and endangering children. During the trial, the prosecution argued that the murder was not self-defense. Jeffrey had meticulously planned it and staged break-ins to mislead the investigation. Jeffrey Scullin did not plead guilty but also did not contest the charges. Melinda's family requested that he be denied parole to prevent him from harming anyone else. Jeffrey was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment, with the possibility of parole in 33 years.